Hi everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be looking at the 7.24 AD carry tier list. So I'm going to try to do more of these non-support tier lists. Maybe, every patch or two I'll try to cover every role as much as I can. On this patch, of course, I do the support tier list every patch, but I'm going to go ahead and get the AD carry, and then maybe before the next patch, I can go ahead and grab like beginning of the season thoughts for jungle and mid lane as well. Maybe top lane too, if we get some time for it. But first off, we're going to talk about the overall AD carry meta right now, sort of what's going on, what defines a good AD carry. Talk about some key considerations, so what makes for a good AD carry, which is similar. Going to be a little bit of overlap with the first part. So we'll set all that up for you, and then talk about the itemization a little bit there as well, and runes. And then we'll go down here and we'll get into the list itself. So you can access the Google Doc in the description if you just want to see the list. You don't have time to watch the whole thing, and you can also find timestamps in the description so you can see me talk about whichever champion you're most interested in. So if you just want to hear about Twitch, you can just watch the Twitch section. If you just want to hear about Tristana, you can watch the Tristana section. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get in here. Okay, so let's talk about the AD carry meta really quickly. So AD carry meta has shifted quite a bit during the preseason. So early on, a lot of it was defined sort of the ground level, what was good was really the press the attack. That's what everyone, noticed. They're like, okay, that's a really good mastery. Everybody's got to get that, or rune rather. And if we look at it, it's easy to see why. I mean, this is something that everybody spotted in the preseason. I thought it was going to be really overpowered, so did other people. I did think that lethal tempo would be a bit more competitive than it has been, but I certainly recognized that press the attack was going to be super powerful. So press the attack, if you don't know, if you land 3 attacks on a single target, then you get bonus damage, and the target takes 12% increased damage from all subsequent sources. So this is not just you, it's not just your auto attacks, it's 12% damage from everything. That's 12% damage from Annie, 12% damage from Master Yi, 12% damage from towers and Baron. It's everything. Okay, so it's very, very good, and it lasts for 6 seconds. So this is still, I think, in general, the best rune to go on most AD carries. Very few might go lethal tempo, and there are a couple that actually like the new reworked fleet footwork, and we'll talk about those as we get to them. But it's still a meta that's largely defined by press the attack, triumph, alacrity, and coup de grace. So that means that champions that have a lot of attack speed so they can get to press the attack, or they have some sort of auto attack reset kind of mechanism benefit from this. Although not as much as you would suspect. Like, I thought that Lucian would be a lot better in the preseason because he can very easily trigger press the attack with just an attack, a dash, and then his double attack triggers it almost instantly. And so I thought he would be a lot stronger than he has been. We'll talk about Lucian as we go down. But this is kind of the standard on most AD carries, has been the press the attack. And so, like I said, we have some fleet footwork, and then Ezreal is very good with kleptomancy. He's a special case. We'll talk about him when we get to him. And another instance, though, that took a lot of people by surprise, including myself, early on, was the use of Comet. Now, this has been nerfed. Not Comet itself, but the entire sorcery tree has been nerfed to some extent. But the power of Comet with lethality AD carries, I knew that something like Electrocute would be really good with lethality, and I thought that lethality users would be good in the mid lane. Although, ironically, Zed and Talon haven't been that good in the mid lane so far. Lethality AD carries, however, have been very good in this preseason. So, if you think about Misfortune, Jhin, Varus to a lesser extent, mostly Misfortune and Jhin, have been very good in the early preseason because they could really abuse Comet, and they had supports that also abused Comet. So you saw like Misfortune support, you see Xerath support, Xayah support. A lot of these supports were very good early on because there was a ton of damage in the meta. But that has shifted. This has been nerfed several times. Aerie got nerfed, which is another thing that some AD carries would use. I think Misfortune was using that initially, and then she switched over to Comet. Mana flow ban has been nerfed, which hurts the mana, especially of Misfortune early on. But it also is applicable to Jhin as well. Celerity got nerfed, which is something else those champions want. And Scorch got nerfed, which is something else those champions want. And the base AD and AP of the tree got nerfed. And Misfortune got nerfed directly with her ease. And Misfortune has been hit with like 5 direct and indirect nerfs in this in this preseason, and then Jhin has been hit with quite a few as well. So that has changed. So now it's become a meta that once again is focused around high scaling crit AD carry. So I don't think it's really an early game meta as much as it was. Like early game champions can still get an advantage and can still be powerful, but I think much more so than maybe in patch 7.22 or 7.23, I think it's become a late game scaling AD carry meta once again, because these things have been nerfed quite a bit. Not completely out of contention, but they're just not as oppressive as they once were. And they're based on the kinds of supports that are getting played and the kinds of runes and itemization that's available to you. A lot of champions like Twitch and like Vayne, who scale up over time, have become sort of the paramount picks. Okay, so that's something that sort of changed and evolved during the preseason. Another thing that has changed or sort of evolved has been the prevalence of tanks. Now, I thought that tanks were still good. I thought that people just had tank fatigue at the start of the preseason, which I still think that's the case. And what I mean by that is people are just tired of playing tanks, you know, in other roles. And mostly I'm thinking of like top lane and jungle. A lot of people are just tired of tanks. You know, they just wanted to play something a little more sexy, have a little more damage, carry a little bit more. They want to experiment with stuff. There's a lot of experimentation in the preseason. But the tanks never went away. They're still very good, and the changes to Sunfire Cape made them even better. And a lot of this stems from Aftershock being an extremely powerful rune as well. And so Aftershock on someone like Maokai or even Grasp is still really good too. But I think a lot of it's Aftershock. But either way, like Aftershock and Grasp, and then, you know, something like Font of Life Conditioning and Second Wind is really good for tanks also. In the top lane has made tanks very good, and they're really hard to deal with. And things like, you know, Shyvana, Xin Zhao is kind of a special kind of pseudo-tank that's difficult to kill, but he's his own problem right now, balance-wise. But if you think about things like Sejuani's, still pretty good in the jungle. Shyvana is really strong in the jungle, very popular. You know, relatively tanky, not super tanky early on because she gets a couple of damage items typically, but still later on, especially very tanky, very difficult to deal with. Maokai, Shen, and so a good AD carry right now needs to be able to do something with those tanks. Either they have to be very mobile so they can kind of kite and avoid the tanks, or they need to be able to blow them up pretty quickly if they have a lot of items. So that's a major consideration as well. Assassins are still floating around and pretty popular, so mobility is a key here that you're going to see with a lot of kind of the top picks. Is that they can kite tanks and they can get away or deal with assassins in one way or another. So, you know, people are playing things more like, you'll see like more Fizz, Akali, Diana. A lot of these assassins people are trying out a little bit more in the preseason, but you still have your range threats too, like your Talia and such. But it's a really wide open meta right now. I mean, I think this is the most diverse meta that we've seen in a really long time. There's so many different strategies that are viable, so many different champions in every role. So it really needs to be an AD carry that can just kind of adapt to situations, and it's just going to be good in a lot of different game states. So they have to be pretty good against tanks, and they have to be pretty good against assassins, which is rare because usually you don't see both of those in the same, like with the same popularity in the same meta, because tanks usually kill assassins. But assassins are around because there are also a lot of squishy champions around that deal fairly well with the tanks. So, you know, they have to be able to deal with a lot of stuff. So you need to be pretty versatile. How well can the champion evade CC? Now, this is something, especially from the support role, is becoming very popular, especially with the advent of Leona. You have to be able to deal with Leona unless you're going to ban her out. She has a lot of crowd control. She's super popular right now. And if you have a stationary AD carry that just cannot deal very well with a Leona engage, that's going to be a problem. So that's what makes something like an Ezreal or a Vayne very strong right now, is because they can dodge her engages pretty easily, and they scale pretty well. So being able to deal with Leona is key. And then champions like Alistar are also really popular. Blitzcrank is really popular. So a lot of these hard engage tank supports are becoming some of the most popular supports right now, especially after the nerf to Ardent Sensor. And so you need to be able to play champions that can deal with that atmosphere. And then finally, I think we're back to Critical Strike once again being king of the hill here. There was a moment earlier in the preseason that I just talked about where lethality was kind of the king of the bot lane, where anyone that could use either Airy or Comet, and then a lot of lethality is good. And the reason that that's good is because Critical Strike doesn't apply to Comet. Critical Strike also doesn't apply to abilities. So it doesn't apply to like Jin's Q, it doesn't apply to Jin's ult, it doesn't apply to Miss Fortune's E. It does apply to Miss Fortune's ult, which is kind of a special case. But in many cases, that's why lethality is strong, because it adds additional damage to Comet. It adds additional damage to Scorch. I believe Scorch can be either AD or AP. I'm not sure about that one. But I know that Comet adapts. Say it's adaptive damage, so if it picks AD, which it will if you're an AD carry, then lethality applies to the Comet, where Critical Strike doesn't. And that's why lethality is so good, is because Comet is basically another ability that you get for free whenever you cast abilities. Okay, that's magic damage. That does not adapt, so lethality does not apply to Scorch. But like I said, it does apply to Comet, which is really important. So that's what makes it really strong. And the same is true of Electrocute in the mid lane. A lot of AD carries will not run Electrocute, but that's part of what makes Electrocute so strong, is it has a really high bonus AD ratio for assassins, and lethality means that it's going to apply extra damage. So lethality was good, but they have nerfed sorcery several times that I mentioned, and they nerfed lethality items. They took 2 lethality off of them. And tanks, people are getting over their tank hangover. They're sobering up a little bit, and they're deciding that they want to win games of League of Legends, so they're playing tanks again. So you're seeing a lot more Maokai's lately, a lot more Sejuani, Shins, Jarvans, all that kind of stuff. And so lethality is losing its luster because people are tired of losing. They're tired of playing their squishy little champions they don't know how to play, that they were just trolling around with in the preseason, and they're trying to get back on it and get back into form, at least a little bit. There's still a lot of tomfoolery going on out there, but I think more and more people are getting tired of playing around, and they're just wanting to win some games of League of Legends, so they're going back to these tanks. And so I think that that's making lethality strong once again. And once again, there wasn't that much. Like, tanks were always good. Always good. With Aftershock and their itemization, they're still really strong. People just psychologically, I think, were just tired of playing them after the end of last season. I think that's all it was. That's literally it. Is it was a preseason. People didn't care about their elo anymore, and they just wanted to try fun, high damage stuff. I think that it's as simple as that. So anyways, that means Critical Strike's coming back. Critical Strike deals with tanks much, much better than lethality does. There are on-hit builds on certain champions like Kalista, like Varus, that I think are really quite strong, on Kog'Maw. And those kind of scale over time. Depending on the champion, they can scale as well as Critical Strike, but in general, I think Crit is going to be the king, because Crit's pretty good early game. You know, once you get your Infinity Edge in like a Ezreal or something, it's pretty good in like the mid game. Whereas on-hit, so like maybe an item and a half, Crit starts taking off, and on-hit really requires like 2 or 3 items to get going, but can do a lot later. Whereas lethality is is even faster. It's single item, but it falls off a lot later on. So once someone gets their Ghost Blade, they start doing a lot of damage with lethality. So, you know, this is the fastest, second fastest, and the slowest scaling. Okay, and then how scaling works. If you want to know, I have a video that I posted back in April that explains how tank itemization and scaling works. I'm not going to rehash all of that again here, but it's basically similar to how it was back then. So just go ahead and watch that video. I have it timestamped to start like right at the ADC scaling portion. So I don't remember how long it is. It's probably 10 or 15 minutes, but check that out if you're interested. And I will talk about itemizations for individual AD carries, but just as a whole, if you're wondering, why do certain items scale better? What does scaling mean? What does that imply? Why is that an important concept to understand if you're newer to the game? Or even if you've been around for a while, but you just haven't thought, what does scaling mean? People throw that word around, but why do some champions scale better than others? Then just watch that video. It explains it really nicely and succinctly for you in probably like 10 or 15 minutes. Okay, so key considerations for good AD carries. Once again, does the champion scale well with crit is a big one. Is Ardent Censer good with the champion? That's not necessarily as important as it used to be a few patches ago, but it is a nice perk. If you have something like a Taric or a Janna on your team, being able to use Ardent Censer is nice, but it's not entirely necessary, so I can take that off there. Does the champion handle engaged tanks really well? Does the champion work with engaged tanks? Can the champion wave clear in Siege? And does the champion have strong utility? These are all things that could potentially make for a good AD carry. Okay, so let's go ahead and get in here. Start talking about the AD carries proper. Okay, so number one, forever and always, in solo queue, unless they nerf him a lot, is going to be Twitch. Okay, and I talk about this all the time. He's so good with Twitch. And I had someone tell me last night on stream, actually, my friend watched your channel, and now he's a one-trick Twitch, and he's just, like, skyrocketing in ELO. And it's like, well, awesome, because that's what you do. If you want to get a lot of ELOs, you play Twitch. So what is it about this rat? And I explain this all the time, anytime I talk about AD carry and why he's good. There are a lot of reasons why Twitch is really good, especially in solo queue. So the number one most obvious reason is that he has stealth. Okay, so this makes him different from every other AD carry, especially in lower elo, is people do not respect stealth. They don't respect or understand champions that go invisible. Okay, they only understand what they see, and a lot of times they don't even watch their minimap. And if Twitch gets ahead, he can just run around and just kill whoever he wants at Platinum and lower a lot of the time. Because he gets to pick where he's going to be, who he's going to open on. He almost always gets the first hit. And usually he can get, you know, maybe 2 or even 3 hits sometimes on somebody before they even realize what's going on. So he just has Infinity Edge. He shows up invisible. Boom. Hits him. Crit. Fight's over. Pretty much. If he gets the first hit and it's a crit. And then he just keeps attacking them. So unless it's a champion that has a ton of crowd control or that has even higher burst than he does, then he's going to kill him. And he doesn't have to fight those people. He can pick off the people that are really squishy and really vulnerable. Right? So the fact that he can go stealth like that means that he can double as an AD carry or an assassin, depending on how the game is. That makes him very versatile. So if he's very far ahead, he can just go down and assassinate that Jinx who's trying to farm a side lane. You know, he can go and assassinate that Talia that's trying to go get her blue in the jungle, or he can go pick off, you know, the Master Yi that's trying to get his red. He has the ability to snowball harder than any other AD carry. So not only is he invisible, but his kit, which we'll talk about here in a second, allows him to have some of the highest scaling damage in the game, and he's very versatile in his builds as well as his play style. So he can play team fights very well. He can play, you know, one-on-one assassination very well. And he can build crit. He scales very well from crit, and he scales very well from on-hit. And so if they ever nerf crit, if they ever just decide, hey, you know, Infinity Edge has been good for too long, or we're going to nerf some of the Zeal items or whatever again, then he can survive. You know, he can go into a Blatheru and King build, for example, or I guess he wouldn't really want like a Ginsu's build, but he has lots of different builds he can get. And he has, you know, some of his core items have been nerfed. He used to go Hurricane, Blatheru, and King earlier this season in March and April when he was the best AD carry. They nerfed all of those items. They nerfed all of the on-hit stuff really hard. And so he was like, okay, fine, I'm going crit, and just switched over to crit, no problem. So he has, unlike most other AD carries, he has multiple build paths that are viable that he can go, and multiple play styles. So that just means that he's very resilient. He's almost never going to get nerfed out of the meta. Like, they have to nerf him directly a lot, and he has been nerfed. He got nerfed at the beginning of Season 7, if we look at his history. But it doesn't matter, just because he's so versatile. Like I keep saying over and over again, he's always relevant in a game. And it doesn't matter if he's down like 0-5 in a game and down 30 CS in lane. If you let him stick around at 20 to 25 to 30 minutes, he's going to take over the game. He's going to win the game for his team. So he's just a ticking time bomb. It just forces your enemies to not only keep him down in lane, but to actually close out the games. You just have to freaking, you know, not only just throw him in the gutter, but just like cram him, you know, in the gutter, in the dumpster, and just keep him out. Like, if you give him any breathing room whatsoever, he will take over. And that's very dangerous. Yeah, so they nerfed him in 6.24. They nerfed his mana cost. They nerfed his poison, which this doesn't look like a lot, but it's actually quite significant over time, especially during the laning phase. So they thought they'd nerf him in the laning phase and make it to where, and they nerfed a lot of his stuff here. But anyways. So let's talk about his abilities really quickly, and then we'll look at his itemization. We'll move on to the next one. But I do want to spend a decent chunk of time on Twitch here because he is the best, and he will be the best for the foreseeable future in solo queue. Now, you even saw him some in pro play. Now, in pro play, you don't see him as much, or in challenger, because the stealth is not going to be as as useful. Like, it is useful, but people actually know, challenger players, oh, there's a 3-0 Twitch, I shouldn't push up this far in lane, or I shouldn't be by myself, you know, because Twitch is this fed. That is a question people don't ask themselves a lot of time in Platinum and lower. They just go do whatever they think they're going to do, and then if Twitch shows up, they just rage at the AD carry for feeding Twitch. So the stealth isn't as useful in pro games, but it's still pretty good. You saw him a lot at Worlds. Well, a decent amount at Worlds. Okay, so his basic attacks apply poison, which is good. It's true damage over time, so it cuts through all armor, stacking up to 6 times, it does this amount. So, pretty good little extra damage. I mean, if you stack it 6 times on somebody, that's 30 damage per second for 6 seconds. That's 180 true damage total, which is a lot. That's a lot of true damage. I mean, that's equal to about... You know, I like to think of true damage as double damage. That's not exactly mathematically accurate compared to typical physical damage. But that's just a good sort of rule of thumb to think of. So if something's doing 180 true damage, that's really closer to 360 physical damage. Once again, that depends on their armor and all that stuff. But that's just like a good, easy rule of thumb to think of. So that's a lot of damage. That's a passive that does 360 physical damage if you get it stacked up. Now, Hurricane applies this, and his ult applies this. So each bolt of Hurricane will apply this. And each attack on his ultimate, each person that he hits with his ultimate will apply this as well. So in a team fight, this is what makes him such a good team fighter, is he can stack Deadly Venom on people really quickly, an entire team. So he gets that 360 damage over 6 seconds, and this refreshes, of course. So if you keep hitting them, it will keep ticking for more and more and more. Okay, Ambush. Bread and butter of Twitch. Go stealth. And then when he pops out of stealth, he has a lot of attack speed. They've nerfed this over time, but it's still really good. It's up to 50% attack speed, and it lasts for 5 seconds. So when he pops out of stealth, he gets 5 seconds of just like going off with 50% attack speed. Now, there's a couple of key considerations here. He gains 10% bonus movement speed, so it does help him run away from people, but it's even better for running towards people if he's trying to chase people down. And a really important thing that they added at some point when they reworked him, I think a season or 2 ago, was if an enemy person dies while they're affected by Deadly Venom, he gets a reset on his stealth. So basically, in a team fight, he can pop up, and this is how Twitch should be played most of the time. He can pop up, pop his ult, you know, max range or whatever, gets 850 range on his ult, kill somebody, and then he can go invisible and run away if he needs to. So, you know, it's really hard to keep a hold of him if it's a good Twitch. Whenever he gets a kill, he can go invisible, reposition, and then decide when he wants to show up again. So unless the enemy is dropping control wards in the middle of the fight, which often they aren't, it's very hard to keep track of him. So he's kind of shares that quality with Vayne, who we'll talk about here in a second. But it's very difficult to really pin him down in a team fight, because he can just keep going invisible. Or he can just show up and assassinate someone in the jungle, you know, someone who's trying to kill their red. Even if allies are relatively close by, if he kills them and pops invisibility, he can get away a lot of the time. So it's really nice engage tool, because it gives you the 50% attack speed, but it's also a nice escape tool because it has that reset after you get the kill, and it gives you the bonus movement speed to help you get away, which is a lot. I mean, 10% is a lot of bonus movement speed. So yeah, I mean, that's one key part of it that's really strong. Venom Cask is whatever. I mean, it applies a couple of stacks of poison, gives you a slow. This is kind of the thing you're going to put 1 point in for most of the game. It's okay. Not a huge deal. This is another thing that's really important with this kit, though, is Contaminate. So each person that has Deadly Venom applied to them, you can activate Contaminate to do extra damage. So they're taking, if they get full stacked here at level 17, you know, they're going to be taking 360 damage effectively. Around 360, you know, once again, depending on armor. And then Contaminate can do up to 290 plus 150% of your bonus AD, which is massive. Oh, I didn't even realize that he gets bonus damage on hit per attack. Wow. And then when he activates it, wow, I didn't even realize that he gets extra bonus damage per attack. I thought it was just when he activated it. Is that right? Bonus damage per stack. Oh, no. Okay, that's... Okay, so it's not on hit. What is this bonus? Or base physical damage. Okay, so it has a base and then it has a bonus per stack. Okay, so it doesn't... You have to activate it. It doesn't have a passive. Sorry. I misread that there. A little tired. But... anyways, it does have the active, and it does a lot of damage. It does not remove the poison either. So they're still going to be taking this, the 6 seconds of true damage, even if you press this. So it does not eat all of the stacks. Whenever you do it, it just applies this damage. So that's allows 290 plus 150% bonus AD. So, you know, once you get your Infinity Edge, that's an 80-80 swing, and so you're going to have somewhere around... It's bonus AD, though, so that does not apply to your base AD. But if you, have, like, 80 off of that, and then you're going down the precision tree, I guess you're not going to get a lot of AD from any of that stuff. You might take Eyeball Collection and get a bit more AD. You probably have around 100 bonus AD, at level 9. Maybe more than that. But either way, that's still 440 damage, even if you only have 100 bonus AD. That's a lot of extra damage on Contaminate. And it's area of effect, so anyone who is affected by poison. So once again, this is great for team fights. When you show up, pop everybody with your Hurricane and your Spray and Pray, get a bunch of Venom stacked up on them, press Contaminate, and there's your pentakill. So that's a ton of damage. And then we get to his ultimate, which gives him 850 range. This is very important to keep this in mind. Most players do not use this correctly. With Twitch, 850 range. This is not 250 range, it's 850 range. Okay, I see so many Twitches just open up, like, right next to, almost in melee combat with the enemy team, and then they just turn around and kill them. It's like, this is so far. This is, like, basically tower range territory. So you can fire from a really, really long ways away with Spray and Pray and be very, very safe on the back line. And that's his major advantage, is that he has this huge range. I mean, that's like 1/3 more range than Caitlyn on her auto attacks. So it is really, really far. And so they do 100% to 40% damage. They apply on-hit effects, and they can critical strike against each target. Okay, so they do apply Deadly Venom. They do apply the Hurricane on hit. They apply Blade of the Ruined King on hit. They apply everything. And he gets some bonus AD to go along with it. Now, the thing that people mess up with this all the time, other than opening and melee combat with it, is they don't understand, especially at level 6, that you lose damage when it passes through any enemy. Every enemy it passes through. It doesn't say enemy champion. It says enemy. Okay, so that includes minions. So what will happen a lot of times with amateur Twitch players is they will open up and try to attack people in lane with Spray and Pray. And they actually lose damage. It's one of the only abilities in the game where you can actually go negative with your damage. So let's say that you open up and you shoot through 3 minions to hit, or you shoot through 2 minions, and the third person you hit is the enemy champion in lane. So you're trying to fire on them basically through a minion wave with your ult. Let's say that you have, 100 AD when you try to do this. Okay, so you have 100 AD, you get plus 20, and then you're only getting 40% damage. Because that's your entire damage. That's not just 40% of this bonus 20 AD, it's 40% of your total AD for all items and everything that you have. Right, so that reduces your base AD as well. Okay, because it doesn't say it reduces your bonus AD, it said it reduces the total damage that you're dealing. Okay, so times 0.4. So instead of doing, if you didn't turn this on at all in lane, right? So if you didn't turn this on and you just straight auto attacked an enemy champion, you would be doing 100 damage, on hit, 100 physical damage. If you turn this on and you attack through minions, you're only dealing 48 damage per hit. So you just reduced your damage by 52%. Just because you pressed your ult. And people don't realize this. They sit there and shoot through minions, and they're just like, oh my gosh, why am I not dealing any damage? Because you're reducing your damage by 60%. Yeah, you're getting the bonus AD, but it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter if you're getting 20 bonus AD if you're reducing your total damage by 60%. So that's a really, really big deal, and I see so many Twitches mess this up. So really, you should not use this ult unless you have a clear line of sight shot early, or in case you're just not going to be able to reach them. Like, they're about 800 range away, and you're just not going to be able to get to them. And that's like the only time you should use this. So ideally, you know, in a fight, like a normal fight in lane early on, you should open up from invisibility, just use your normal shots, and then once they flash and get out of the minion wave, and you want to position yourself. Let me show you. You want to position yourself so that you're not going to be shooting through so that you're not going to be shooting through minions. All right. Wow, that's really detailed. So let's say the minion wave's like right here. You know, your Leona wants to engage and you go invisible. And the enemy's just, you know, whatever, just last hitting, you know, in this area. All right, so instead of like opening up and shooting through here, shooting through the minions, like let's say Leona wants to engage through this bush with like her ultimate on a Varus or something. You would want to stealth around either and go through this bush or stealth around and get this angle on them if you're going to turn on your ult, so that you're not shooting through these minions anymore. You have a clear line of sight shot at them. Okay, so you wait on Leona to engage. She hits him with the R, then she goes in with her E. Then you pop your ult, start firing on that Varus right here. You know he's going to ult you immediately if he can, and if Leona doesn't body block that ult, which she should be trying to body block that ult, if she doesn't, then you're going to have to flash it, so be ready for that. That's a different story. But you need to make sure that you have a clear shot, or you can try to go around this way if their support's not in this bush. You can try to go around this way and shoot this at this angle. But you do not want to shoot through the minions at them. That is a party foul. Okay, you need to try to get an angle. Now, if you have to shoot through the minions, like let's say that this Leona just goes and you're like right here and you don't have time to go through that, then just walk up and normally attack. Wait until he flashes, and then run forward, and then once you're clear of the minions, then pop your ult and gun him down. Okay? But do not waste your ult and just fire through minions. Because what will happen, let's say you engage with Leona here, you pop your ult, you start firing through a minion, and you're only doing 48 damage instead of, you know, 100 like you could be doing. That's going to give Varus time to recover. Their support's going to put exhaust on you, and, you know, they potentially could turn around and kill you. So it's just really, really important to keep in mind that you do not want to turn on your ult and fire through minions with Twitch. Okay, so the big stuff, if you want to play Twitch, you need to position, really use that 850 range. You need to really use those stealth resets to get good positioning in team fights. And another thing is when you show up in stealth, you can wait. You have a long time that you can wait in stealth. You know, 10 to 14 seconds. That means you do not have to be there immediately at the fight. Wait until the enemy uses some of their crowd control, and they will, especially at Platinum and lower. A lot of people won't save their stuff for Twitch. So just wait. If there's a fight breaking out middle, for example, let's say they have the Leona. Okay? So you're rolling up. You know there's going to be a fight middle. Your Maokai's looking to fight. They're pinging it. There's going to be a big team fight in the middle. Just roll up, pop invisibility right here, and just chill. Just like wait on the edge. And just wait until you see Leona use her ult, or Malzahar use his ult, or just somebody use some of their crowd control. Just figure out what's the major crowd control that could get to me. That's going to be a problem, whether it's Sejuani, Ashe, Varus, Fiddlesticks, Malzahar, Leona. Whoever has crowd control on their team, just watch and wait. And then once they use it, so let's say that your Maokai engages. You know, with Righteous Glory, gets on their AD carry right here. Leona panics and just busts all of her crowd control. Uses her ultimate, her E, and her Q to try to peel the Maokai off. That's when you go in. You're like, okay, boom, there's Leona. She just used her ult. I'm going to pop it. And so then you pop your ult and just blow them away. Because you just saw they just used their crowd control. They're not going to have it for you because they wasted it on Maokai. So, watch that. So just sit and wait in stealth, wait on people to use their stuff, and then pop, open up your stuff. But do not come up here. So the party foul here would be rolling up invisible, Malachi, you know, gets on their AD carry, you roll up and try to open up on their AD carry right here in like 300 range when Leona's standing right here, and then instead of using all of her crowd control on Malachi, she's going to say, oh crap, there's a Twitch ulting, I'm going to use all my crowd control on this Twitch that just opened up basically in melee combat. Like, that's kind of the solo queue special there. Do not do that. Wait. Use your 850 range. Wait until you see the crowd control. Do not shoot through minions. If there's lane minions there, you need to try to, once again, just like the bot lane example, you need to try to open up where you're not going to hit those lane minions as much as possible. Okay, so that's pretty much it for Twitch. Like I said, I wanted to spend a long time on him. We'll go a bit faster with the others. But I do think he's the best solo queue warrior. I think you should be spamming Twitch if you really want to gain a lot of elo. Just keep those 3 things in mind. Do not fire through minions. Use your stealth intelligently. Wait until they use their crowd control. And use your max range whenever you can. If you do that, you'll be a great Twitch player. Okay. His itemization, you know, the best itemization for Twitch... let's see here. Is going to be just Infinity Edge into Hurricane into Blade the Ruined King the vast majority of the time. So yeah, something like this. I mean, you can go Static Shiv as well. If you want to go Static Shiv, that gives you an extra bit of burst. You just have to decide if you want the sustain from the Blade the Ruined King or if you want the Static Shiv. And a lot of pros do it in different ways with Twitch. Most people just go Infinity Edge. Infinity Edge Hurricane is almost always the standard. There might be some times where you want to get Blade the Ruined King early if it's kind of a tough lane. I still am not the biggest advocate of that. There are a lot of ways you can get through tough lanes now. So a lot of people, you see a lot of them go Domination second. That's because they go for the thing that heals them, the Taste of Blood. Eyeball collections. The Taste of Blood heals you. You can open with Doran's Shield. A lot of people will get greedy and open Doran's Blade. But if you're in a tough lane, if you're against like a Lulu or a Nami or a Sona or Xayah or just something else that's going to be harassing you, start with Doran's Shield. Okay, just please get Doran's Shield. You know, another option, if it's a really tough lane and you think Taste of Blood's not going to be enough, then you could go for something like... you know, Inspiration and then get Biscuits plus Boots. It's not going to be as good as Eyeball Collection, but you're going to get a power spike faster because once you get those boots and then you upgrade to, you know, Berserker Boots, then you're getting about a 400 to 450 gold value off of that. And you're going to be able to complete that around 10 minutes or so, if depending on how many kills and assists you get. So that's a nice value. The Eyeball Collection, really, it depends on how the game's going, but you're not going to fully stack that Eyeball Collection, usually until at least 20 minutes, if not even further. Now, that's worth about 650 gold worth of AD, so it's worth more than Boots, but you get it at a later time. So you get it, you know, 10 to 15 minutes longer. And remember, if you have that power spike early on, you're able to get those Berserker's Greed boots a lot faster because... you're getting the base boost for free for 10, you're getting the extra movement speed, and then you're getting the 50 gold off of the upgrade. That's going to let you roam better. That's going to give you a much stronger gold advantage over your enemy, which could, even if you just get one more kill, maybe you get that one power spike and you get one more kill because you're just fast enough to run them down, or you have just enough attack speed to get off that one last attack before they get in their last attack. That right there pays for itself for not having Eyeball Collection. Just causing one more kill would give you at least 300 more gold, and that would make it a 750 gold value, whereas Eyeball Collection is only worth 650 gold value. So Eyeball Collection is good. It gives you up to 18 AD, which once again, AD is worth 35 gold a pop, 630 gold value. Okay? So yes, Eyeball Collection is the standard. You'll see most people go Taste of Blood Eyeball Collection. But if you're in a really tough lane, it's perfectly acceptable, I think, to go Biscuit Boots. Boots will give you earlier power spike. Biscuit will give you more sustain than Taste of Blood over time, without having the risk of having to auto attack the enemy AD carry if it's dangerous. So you may not get to go up and auto that Caitlyn for the Taste of Blood proc if it's Caitlyn Karma you're against, right? They might just blow you up if you try that. So that's just something to keep in mind in terms of his runes and itemization. But yeah, I would say most of the time... Okay, cool. Most of the time you want to go Infinity Edge. Blade of the Ruined King, you're sacrificing a ton of your early game potential damage by not having crit so that you can make it through lane. Like, most of the people will get that so that they get the extra Vamp Scepter early for the lifesteal. But you shouldn't need that. If you just go Doran Shield plus either Taste of Blood and Biscuits, and then you have a support who goes like Relic Shield, or who has a heal or a shield like a Taric or a Janna or something like that, you should be able to make it. So I would rather go Doran Shield into Infinity Edge than be forced into going into Blade of the Ruined King so that you can go Doran's Blade early. I think it's just too greedy. I think most of the time Twitch should actually get Doran Shield. Because you're not going to be all-inning people. Like, Doran's Blade is really, if you want to fight, if you need that extra health, you want to fight, you want to kill people early. Unless you're going to fight, unless you're going to kill people early, especially if you're going to get harassed and you're a heavy scaling champion like Twitch, then just go Doran Shield a lot of the time. Trust me, you will win a lot more games doing that. Yeah, because a lot of these people are being greedy. Like, Sneaky's being greedy here. He decided to go for Doran's Blade instead of Doran's Shield, got spanked in lane, and I'll guarantee you he's probably doing that because he was up against a tough lane. Yeah, he's up against Jhin Thresh, which are really difficult to deal with early on. You've got Ignite Thresh, then you have Comet Jhin. That's tough. This is greedy. Go Doran Shield. I guarantee you, see, he went Vamp Scepter first because he needs that defense in lane. It's much better just to go Doran Shield, Doran Shield, Taste of Blood, especially if you don't have a healing support. And he didn't. He had a Xerath. So, anyways, but most people you'll see do go the Infinity Edge route early on. Now, getting Blade of the Ruined King is great as like a third item. After you get Hurricane, after you already have your crit from your Infinity Edge, getting that Blade of the Ruined King for the mid game so that you can kite a little bit better and so that you have that huge lifesteal in team fights, that's when it's worth it. It's like a third or a fourth item. But I really don't like rushing that item early. Okay, and it is okay to get Quicksilver Sash. As you see, pros get this item. It's a very, very good item. I mean, I'm a Cutie Pie is, if he's not the highest ranked AD carry, he's certainly up there in solo queue, and he gets Quicksilver Sash a lot in his games. It's a very, very powerful item, but that's a slightly different conversation. Okay, if you're going to get Quicksilver Sash, get it like second or third item. Get your Infinity Edge. If you're just really getting stomped by crowd control by Leona or something like that, get a Quicksilver Sash. You can build it into a lifesteal item later. But most of the time, you'll want at least Infinity Edge Hurricane, and then you can decide whether you want to go Quicksilver, Blade of the Ruined King, or Last Whisper if they already have a super fed tank. Okay, let's talk about Vayne here really quickly. Well, it's not going to be quick, let's be honest, but we'll talk about Vayne. I'll spend most of the time on Vayne, Ezreal, and Twitch because I think you should play one of those three pretty much every game unless you just get bored of them. And then we'll speed up and talk a bit faster about some of the others. AD carry is one of the least diverse roles. I think there are still champions that can do well that aren't like the top of the top, but just by nature, AD carry has always been the least diverse of all roles because it's a very specific niche. It's always like an auto attacker most of the time, you know, that plays AD carry. Whereas like support, you can have tank, utility, AP damage. Like support's one of the most diverse roles. Mid, very diverse. You know, you can have all kinds of different types of mages, AD, even AD carries sometimes get in there. Like Corki's still really good in mid. Top lane, fairly diverse. You have tank, fighter, sometimes AP mages are viable. Same thing in the jungle. AD carry, it's basically always auto-attacking, you know, AD damage type of champions. Which is fine. It just means that there's usually the least amount of wiggle room, because when you have the least amount of roles like that, when everything is just like how well does this champion auto attack and kill things, then there's just going to be certain champions that do that better than others a lot of the time. And so that means that usually it's very, very top weighted. Like, you know, the best 3 to 5 AD carries are just going to crowd out the other AD carries that are possible. And we saw this at Worlds. I mean, at Worlds, I think it was like Xayah, Varus, and I don't remember the other one. Kalista was banned every game. It was basically, I think it was just like Xayah, Varus every game. If I'm remembering that. There might be someone else that wasn't one of those too, but I feel like that was pretty much it in like 80 or 90% of games. Anyways, let's talk about Vayne. Okay, so Vayne historically has been she's tough. She's tough to assess. She's a good one-trick champion in solo queue if you're really good with her, but she's very bad for the vast majority of the population because she's a very high skill cap champion to play her at a super optimal level. Now, if you're really fed, yes, you can just right-click as Vayne and that'll be fine. You know, if you're like at 3 items and the enemy AD carries at 2 items. But if you're really trying to play her at an optimal level, then she is very, very difficult to play perfectly. Okay, so what makes Vayne particularly good? Well, a lot of it is her mobility, and it's the tumble. Okay, so this is what you max first, most of the time. You'll max tumble first. And it allows you to reposition yourself. And that's the best way to think of it, is repositioning. Not roll into melee combat, okay, but to roll into a better position. So you can kite with it or you can chase with it, but you have to decide what's the best way that you want to do that. You can also dodge skill shots with it. So you can dodge like Ash arrows, you can dodge Leona engages, you can dodge Thresh hooks, you can dodge all kinds of things with your tumble. And it's a very low cooldown, it's like 2 seconds. And then when you attack, so you tumble and then you have to attack, and you can tumble again. So it allows you to constantly roll around and reposition yourself. And she also gets movement speed when moving towards enemies at 30. 30 bonus movement speed. It gets tripled to 90 when she has her ult on. So you're not really going to run away from her most of the time. So she's very low range for that. Not very. She's 550 is not that bad. Lucian's 500, which is awful. And I think Sivir's like 450. But 550 is not long range. I mean, Varus is like 575. Ash is like 625. Caitlyn's 650. That's kind of like the average for AD carries. So this makes her really good at small skirmishes, at the Clown Fiesta, because she can constantly roll around, reposition, and she has very heavy single target damage because she wants to hit and focus on one target, so she procs these true bolts. So this allows her to reposition, deals bonus physical damage when she hits. The tumble damage can't critically strike. So this bonus damage cannot critically strike, but the base attack can still critically strike. Okay, and that's a key distinction that I didn't notice until I did the tier list, or the best one tricks for each role video. I noticed that. So let's say that so it's 70% of your total AD, not your bonus AD. So let's say that you have 100 AD and you tumble in and you crit. And let's just say this is level 1, just to make it simple, even though you won't have 180 at level 1. You tumble in, this would normally deal 150 damage because you're getting 50% of your AD. However, it crits, so the base damage, the 100 gets doubled, so that goes to 200, and then you get the 50% added on after that. So it's 250 damage rather than 300 damage. So before this change, they changed her a few patches ago. We look at her history. When did they do that? Okay, 7/19. Okay, so they increased the base damage, but they made it to where the bonus damage cannot critically strike. And they slightly lowered Silver Bolt's true damage, but they changed the minimum, so it's much, much better against squishy targets. So the minimum true damage was increased. So it's a lot better at executing people. And then they gave her a lot of extra duration of Final Hour, which we'll talk about here in a second. But basically, with the old system, it would have been less physical damage, but with the old calculations, it would have been 300 damage. The 100 plus 50, and then you multiply it by 2. Now, it's the 100, multiply it by 2, then you add that on. So yes, it is less damage in some situations, but it's not as much less as you would immediately think. It's still quite a lot of damage, and the base can still crit, so she can still get some pretty big crits. So what this means is build crit on Vayne. Okay, I've seen so many Vaynes going Blade the Ruined King. That is a very outdated build, and it's just not good. It's not good on Vayne anymore. You need to be getting crit. Let me see if pros. Are pros at least getting crit these days? Yes. Virtually everybody's getting crit. Okay, you have some goofballs like St. Vicious here, like trolling around, getting like Ginsu's Rage Bait. You need to be going crit. Needs to be Infinity Edge, Static Shiv, Rapid Fire Cannon most of the time. Okay, so go crit. Like, there are some people sometimes who will go like Blade the Ruined King. The problem is with Blade the Ruined King, and I talk about this in the itemization video, is it just does not have a lot of synergy with other items that Vayne's going to get. Okay, because she doesn't... I mean, if you go Ginsu's Rage Blade and then Blade the Ruined King, like, yeah, that does a lot of good on-hit damage, but that takes a very long time to get to your power spike. Like, Blade does nice damage, but this damage, like, it doesn't crit. The bonus passive damage can't crit, and so it doesn't scale very well with Infinity Edge because it doesn't have a critical modifier on it. And it only has 40 AD, and so that means that your extra AD damage that you're getting off of your tumble, that, you know, up to 70% of your AD is pretty weak because you only have 40 AD. Whereas on an Infinity Edge, you're going to have 70 AD. I thought it was 80. I guess it got reduced years ago, probably. But you're going to get that 70 AD, and you can crit. It's just a much, much higher damage item. So why would people get Blade the Ruined King? Because you have that sustain early on. That's why a lot of people will get it. And Blade the Ruined King, really, if you're going to get that item, it needs to be on a champion that has Hurricane, because Hurricane, each one of those bolts off of Hurricane procs Blade of the Ruined Kings. That gives you a ton of lifesteal and a lot of extra team fight damage. So that's really the synergy, is Blade the Ruined King plus Hurricane. But Vayne doesn't want to go Hurricane because Hurricane does not apply her silver bolts. Okay, that's an exemption to that rule because it's on attack and not on hit. Vayne's basic attacks apply silver bolts. Okay, so this does not, Hurricane does not apply silver bolts to 3 different people. That'd be really cool and really overpowered, but that's not how it works. So she doesn't get Hurricane, and therefore I think she should not rush Blade the Ruined King. Now, if you want to get it 3rd or 4th item, sure. When you need sustain, it's still the best lifesteal. It's still going to be better than Bloodthirst or Death Stance most of the time on her, but it's just not something that you want to rush. Okay, so Tumble, you have great mobility. You can critically strike. It does nice damage. It's a really good power spike once you get Infinity Edge because that just makes your Tumble hit like a truck. Okay, Silver Bolts, great at shredding tanks, up to 12% of the target's maximum health. So you want a lot of attack speed. So Blade does give you attack speed, but it doesn't give you the synergy with the Tumble crits that you really want. So a better way to go about this is to get your attack speed off of crit items. So to get attack speed from Static Shiv and then Rapid Fire Cannon. Okay, so the most common build is going to be the what used to be the Energizer build. You would go Infinity Edge, Static Shiv, Rapid Fire Cannon. That's the 1-2-3 combo of Vayne. All right, and that gives her 80% crit, gives her a ton of attack speed. I don't remember exactly how much attack speed. It's probably, you know, somewhere between 80 to 100% extra attack speed. And gives her a lot of movement speed, which complements her mobility and tumble. So just a lot of good synergy with those items in her kit. And then finally, Condemn. Condemn knocks people into walls. It can give a stun, which is very nice. I mean, 1.5 seconds. So you can tumble to reposition yourself and then knock people into wall with your E. And that's sort of the combo. So if you have like, and a really good Vayne will do this a lot. So if you have, let's say, a Leona down here. I keep using Leona because she's such a popular champion right now. Let's say that their AD carry is like right here, or maybe like right here trying to farm. Trying to hit this. Maybe like Vayne's over here. Or no, I'll tell you what. A better example would be if you're on red side. So if you're on this side. Their AD carry is like right here trying to farm. Right? The wave's right here. And Leona engages. And like you and Leona are right here. The Vayne and Leona are right here. Their AD carry is right here all scared. Leona goes in with her E. You know, Q's, does her stun combo. Like... An okay Vayne is going to roll forward and auto attack, you know, like maybe even auto roll forward auto. But a really good Vayne is going to roll to the side here to find that angle and then Condemn to pin him into the wall and then start autoing him. So when you play Vayne, you need to constantly be looking, can I reposition? Can I tumble to get a good angle to knock somebody into a wall? You can knock people into other types of terrain as well. You can knock people into Ornn Pillars. You can knock people into Trundle Pillars. You can knock people into Anivia Walls. So there are a lot of combos out there with Vayne. You can knock people into Jarvan ults, into those walls. So anything that creates terrain, Vayne's Condemn will pin them against it. And you need to be looking for that. So that's one major use of Condemn. Another one is that you can use it just to knock people away. So if Leona is trying to go in on you with her E, you can knock her away with Condemn. You can get a lot of champions off of you. You can knock Alistar away while he's in mid headbutt with Condemn. You can knock Tristana out of the sky if she's trying to jump on you with Condemn. There are a lot of things you can do that you can cancel from the enemy. Like Akali's trying to jump on you, you can knock her back with a Condemn. There are a lot of ways you can get people off of you. And it does apply a silver bolt proc. So occasionally, and this is very risky to do, but if they're almost dead, you know, you can auto, tumble, auto, and then condemn to proc the silver bolts as the third hit. Now it will knock them away, but if you kill them with it, then it's all good. If you think you're not going to have time for one more auto, like maybe you're tower diving or something like that. So very flexible, has some nice burst potential. I mean, even at level 1, it's going to give you, you know, 100% of your bonus AD and 100 damage when you pin someone into a wall. So it's pretty good. And it's a 1.5 stun, which is pretty massive. So just constantly look for ways to condemn people into walls. And if you can't find that, then, you know, at least try to get people off of you. So this is the thing you'll max last most of the time. So you'll max Tumble, Silver Bolts, Condemn. And then Final Hour gives you a lot of bonus damage, bonus attack damage. And it gives you, whenever you tumble, you turn invisible, and it triples the speed of Night Hunter. So you get 90 movement speed. Duration is up to 12 seconds, and you get a bonus 4 seconds every time you get a kill or an assist. So that means that you can constantly get that extra AD, which is nice. That's a lot of bonus AD. I mean, if you think about those stats, that's like 1,000 extra gold worth of AD early on, which is massive, obviously. And then, like, when you get up to 70 AD, it's going to be even more. Like, it's like over 2,000. The 2,400. That's what makes Vayne scale. That's part of what makes Vayne scale harder than almost any other carry in the game, is she gets a ton of extra stats off of that AD, and of course that synergizes. So this bonus AD can also, you know, if you get crits with Infinity Edge, then that's a ton of extra damage, and the Q gives you extra damage based on your AD. So this bonus AD that you get here scales so well off of your tumble and off of your itemization because you're going to get Infinity Edge. So it's just massive, massive synergy and scaling. And then this invisibility for 1 second is very underrated now that control wards don't see invisible champions anymore. This is so powerful because it ensures that you're going to get multiple hits for free. And you can tumble every 2 seconds and you're invisible for 1 second. So that basically means tumble, you get a free auto attack or 2. They try to find out where you are. Tumble, you know, auto, tumble again, go invisible. So this is constantly going to cancel their autos a lot of times. And it's going to make it very difficult to hit you with skill shots because they don't know where you are a lot of the time. And some things that are targeted, that are like point-click target, it's very difficult to keep track of you, especially if you're rolling in and out of bushes. So, for example, let's say that you're bot lane, and a fight breaks out, and the enemy has a Leona. It's going to be very difficult for her to figure out, like, what's going on, right? And so, you know, you can roll up. Let's say that Leona tries to ult you. You Q away from that, turn invisible, like roll into a bush. She's like, where did she go? You auto attack, you know, auto attack somebody. Then she tries to turn around and E you. You can tumble again to dodge the E. And so it just makes it a nightmare. Or like a Thresh hook. You know, you can dodge Thresh hooks with it. You can dodge his flay. If he gets close enough to flay, you can knock him back with Condemn. So you just have so much control over where people are and how you're interacting with them in team fights, because you can constantly reposition by going invisible, which is very similar to Twitch, only you can do it much, much more frequently than Twitch can. You can't sit there and hang out invisible like Twitch can, but you can constantly reposition. roll in and out of bushes. Now, this does have synergy with Duskblade, which is a cute interaction. So every time you tumble and go invisible, then whenever you pop back up again, you get a Duskblade proc for bonus damage. But do not go for that build. It's a bad build on Vayne, okay? It sounds fun. It sounds intriguing. People have experimented with it. You're giving up way, way too much damage by doing that, okay? And a big part of that is the lethality doesn't apply to your silver bolts, which is a big part of your damage and your kicks. It's true damage. And it just do not go lethality Vayne, please. I've seen people do it. It's just too low a damage, okay? So yes, it is a cute interaction with Duskblade to do this, but just, you know, it's a cute interaction, just like critting somebody for like 1500 damage when you have Infinity Edge and Static Shiv, okay? So that's the cute interaction that you want. Okay, so very, very good. So what does all this mean for Vayne? And she can keep this up in fights for a really long time. They just added this. So whenever you get a killer assist, you're constantly tumbling around, you know, repositioning, chasing people, doing a ton of damage. And remember, this is like 2,000 something gold worth of stats in the late game. So you want to keep this up as long as you can in a team fight. And it has a pretty low cooldown later on. So what does this mean for Vayne? So this means that Vayne is very, very good at skirmishing. So because she can roll around, reposition, and has a ton of single target damage and mobility, that she's very good at fighting 1-on-1 or like 2-on-2. She's not as good at 5-on-5. Okay, she's okay at 5-on-5. You know, she can hang out on the backline. She kites tanks very well because she can, once again, she can constantly tumble, reposition, get away from that Olaf, get away from the Shyvana. All these champions that are trying to get on her, she can tumble back and just keep attacking. But she doesn't have any area of effect damage like Twitch does. Remember, Twitch hits everybody with his Hurricane, with his ult. He just like erases entire teams. She doesn't do that. She has to pick them off 1v1. Okay, so that's one major thing. Another thing is she doesn't really have spells that deal damage. So she has to auto attack a lot to do damage, which means she has pretty low burst unless you just happen to crit somebody with your Q a couple of times. So that means that, you know, she's going to need fights to drag on for a little bit. And she can't blow up priority targets. So, you know, if you... Just trying to think of something compared to, like, Draven's burst with his Q because he does a lot of extra damage on his crits. Or, like, Twitch's burst with his ult. She's just not going to have the same level of teamfight presence as those other ones. Although she definitely can hack people down and take them out one at a time. In team fights, she's just not going to have as much area of effect team contributions as some of the other AD carries on this list. But she still is fine in team fights. It just takes her a little bit longer to hack through people. But, you know, given that, she also does a lot of damage to tanks. Okay, because she's going to build crit, and crit is one of the best ways to crack through armor. And her silver bolts, every third attacker, true damage of the enemy's maximum health. So if they have a lot of health, if they have a lot of armor, that's the best case scenario for Vayne compared to other AD carries. So she can kill those Malachi, she can kill the Shen, you know, she can kill the Ornn. All right, so that's what sets her apart from a lot of other AD carries, is that she's a very, very good tank killer. Okay, so if there's just a super fed tank that's just constantly diving an AD carry on the backline, Vayne is the best AD carry who's equipped to do with that because she's such an awesome duelist. All right, so that's something that Twitch does not do as well as Vayne. So if you get that Malachi that gets on that Twitch on the back line, you know, if he flash W's onto the Twitch, that's a big problem. With Vayne, it's a problem, but it's one that's more manageable because you can get them off of you with Condemn, and then you can just keep kiting backward and hitting them with those silver bolts. Vayne also doesn't have wave clear. So she doesn't have any sort of area of effect stuff that can get rid of mini wave. So Twitch can apply poison with his Hurricane to multiple targets. Twitch doesn't have amazing wave clear, but it's okay. He applies poison to multiple targets with Hurricane. He can throw his Venom Cask on a target and then eventually use his Contaminate to clear out waves fairly quickly, whereas Vayne has to individually attack each one. Now, Static Shiv does help with that because the Static Shiv proc, you know, hits a bunch of different things whenever it goes, but overall, historically, that's a problem, is that she doesn't have wave clear and she's very low range, so she doesn't take towers very quickly either. Although she's pretty good against Baron because she does the true damage to Baron or Dragon. So she has that going for her. So overall, pretty weak early game, similar to Twitch. Doesn't have a lot of burst early. Doesn't have a lot of range. Doesn't have a lot of crowd control. Doesn't have a lot of good farming capabilities early on. But once she gets to, 2 items, once she gets that Infinity Edge Static Shiv, it's off to the races. And she can easily take over a game by herself. Perhaps not as much as Twitch, in the same sense where you can be down 0-5 and 30 CS and come back as easily as Twitch can. But still, nevertheless, very, very powerful when she gets a couple of her items under her belt. And Snowball's harder than almost any other champion. Because like Twitch, you're not going to get away. You're not going to run away from her. Twitch can go stealth and run people down. She can also just run people down with her tumble. Okay, so very strong. Damn, I gotta pick it up. I'm spending so much time on like the top 3. Okay, Ezreal. Ezreal is kind of an odd duck here. He has fallen down a little bit. But he's still pretty good. So Ezreal's unique interaction, sort of his claim to fame right now, is his Mystic Shot applies on hit damage, and how this interacts with Kleptomancy. So how Kleptomancy works is whenever you cast a spell, the next time you auto-attack somebody, then you get free items, right? So sometimes it's potions, sometimes it's flasks, sometimes it's bags of gold. You get some good stuff. Okay, and you get an additional 5 gold whenever that happens. With Ezreal, whenever he casts his Q, that counts as a spell cast, and then whenever the Q hits somebody, then that counts as an auto attack hit. And it has, what, 1100 range, I believe? Yeah, 1150 range. So this means that he can constantly proc Kleptomancy for the entire game. Whereas any other champion in the mid to late game, you can't just cast an ability and walk up and attack people as an AD carry, because you could get engaged on and killed a lot of times, so it's not safe. But with Ezreal, he can just keep chucking Qs at people, and eventually he's going to hit them, and so he's going to keep getting gold and potions and everything else throughout the entire game. So that makes Klepto extremely strong on him. And he's the highest win rate, especially among like pro top-end players. He's got 59% win rate right now. And then typically you'll want to go Trinity Force, Manamune, and Blade the Ruined King. Because Manamune, this on hit off the Mirror Mana, once you transform it, applies to his Q, does a lot of extra damage. Trinity Force, the spell Blade, applies to his Q, a lot of damage. And then Blade the Ruined King, also a good chunk of damage and heals you. So he is pretty strong at virtually all points in the game. Once he gets his Trinity's good, Mirror Mana is even better, and then once he gets Blade the Ruined King, he becomes very difficult to stop. And he's long range, so he doesn't do as much like high sustained damage in terms of like just sit there and auto attack as some other champions, but he has pretty nice burst with his E auto Q combo. Really nice range. His ultimate is pretty good to snipe people, so he has a lot of utility, a lot of range, decent burst damage. Fairly low sustained damage over time. Doesn't deal with tanks that well. He can get Iceborne Gauntlet and Kite tanks. I'm really not a huge fan of this item on Ezreal. It's okay, but you're giving up so much damage. Like Trinity Force is so much more damage. That 200% extra damage on hit is just massive compared to the 100% off it does. I mean, it's double the damage. Now with this, you do get armor, which is nice, so you can't be assassinated. So he has some resilience to champions like Zed, because he can get this and Ninja Tabi if he wants to, and have some protection against like a Zed or a Talon who's fed. So he does have that as an option. But you gotta keep in mind, this has no AD on it, 0 AD, has no attack speed on it. It does much less damage with Trinity, 100% bonus damage instead of 200%. Doesn't have health on it. Now it is cheaper. I think it's like 3,000 something gold. I can't remember exactly. It's marginally cheaper. $2,700 gold. Okay, so it is cheaper for sure. It's like 1,000 gold cheaper. It's only 93% gold efficient without the passive, though. there's a lot of Texas, so it's hard to tell, but this is 97% efficient. It's just much more slot efficient. Also, and the stats that you're buying, like, you are getting some mana on it, but you're getting 250 mana. Like, you're already going to have a ton of mana off of tier. And when you buy Iceborne Gauntlet, like, you're paying a lot of gold for 500 mana. You don't need that mana on Ezreal. When you have tier and mirror mana, you already have a ton of mana. You know, you're paying 700 gold for this. 700 gold for mana. The CDR is the same. They both give 20% CDR. And you're buying armor instead of attack damage on a champion that's supposed to do a lot of attack damage. Now, yes, you do create slow fields. Yes, this is good for kiting people. But with Trinity, you also get the phage effects. You get to speed up yourself whenever you hit people. You get up to... you know, 20% when you hit people, and then 20 flat, and then you get 60 if you kill something. So I don't know. I think that Trinity's just much better. I mean, you get the attack speed, you get the attack damage, you get the extra movement speed in general. Whereas Gauntlet, you get armor, you're paying a lot for mana. You do slow people with the field, but you can kite anyways with Trinity. And with your E, like Ezreal doesn't have a problem kiting people most of the time. So... and I'm here to tell you from personal experience too. I feel like people lose a lot more. I see them lose a lot more in my games with Iceborne Gauntlet than Trinity. And I know that some pro players get Iceborne. You know, it's like looks like it's about a 50-50 split between Trinity and Iceborne. But just in solo queue, especially platinum and lower, you need damage. Like, you have to be the one dealing damage. Because you got to remember, someone on your team's going to fail. Most of the time, 1 or 2 people are going to fail. So if you have your top laner and your mid laner just get, you know, beaten up in lane, but you're the Ezreal and you go 5-0 in your lane, bot lane, and you waste your lead getting something like Iceborne Gauntlet instead of Trinity, you may not be able to carry those other people because you're just not going to have enough damage to do it. So with the AD carry slot, especially in this meta where people are sometimes running tanks or just goofy champions that just aren't really that efficient, don't do a lot of damage, you have to be the one doing damage as AD carry. So I highly, highly recommend going Trinity over Iceborne. There's just very, unless it's a super fed AD carry. Like I said, there's a Zed that's like 7-0 mid lane, and you know, you haven't committed to getting a big item yet. Like maybe you went Manamune before. Like maybe you went Manamune Sheen or something, and that Zed's like 7-0. Then sure, you know, maybe you have to go Iceborne Ninja Tabi, but I still think most of the time it should be Trinity. Okay. So he gets bonus attack speed based on how many abilities you use, which is nice. Basically, the playstyle with Ezreal is you just chuck Qs and run most of the time. You can E forward sometimes and combo people out, but you should be very, very careful with this. It's really dangerous to do this. Okay? And every time you hit somebody with a Q, all of your other abilities are lowered by 1.5 seconds, including the Q itself. So that includes your ult, that includes like more E's. So if you're constantly hitting people with Q, this gets down to like maybe not a 5-second cooldown. Well, you do get like at least 20% CDR. So you can get this cooldown down quite a lot. So basically this is up a lot. You have a lot of mobility, but you should be running back, kiting back, and just keep hitting people with Qs. Unless you can go in for that kill shot and you're like 100% you're going to kill them. And you should be very careful Eing forward a lot of the time. So, you know, you should default to running away, chucking Qs, using your E to kite, use your True Shot Barrage. You should combo this together with crowd control, so whenever your support or somebody else, like, stun somebody, go ahead and put that True Shot Barrage on them, and then go from there. I see too many times Ezreal tries to hold this to snipe people after they're already low, when they could have just applied it, like, 100% hit them, you know, while they're chain stunned by Leona, or while they're hooked by Thresh. Just hit him with the True Shot Barrage. Just get that out of the way first. That's your big, heavy-hitting ability that's relatively easy to dodge for people that aren't crowd-controlled. So Ezreal hooks somebody, just go ahead and start the True Shot Barrage immediately on them. And then if you want to, you can chase them down with like an E and Q. But I see way too many Ezreals holding that ultimate, trying to snipe people at the end. Which is nice, like it can do that, but why not just go ahead and hit them if it's a guaranteed hit if they're crowd-controlled? So yeah, you know, what makes Ezreal so powerful is that he gets a lot of gold. You know, historically, Ezreal has had problems, and I talked about this with the Jungle Ezreal video, in that he has to buy tier early, and it puts him really far behind in terms of his power spikes. He's, you know, pays 750 gold for this mana item. He's going to come back with like tier and, you know, like a sapphire crystal, you know, working towards Sheen, and the enemy's going to come back with a BF sword and just crush him. But now that's not the case. So because he can use Kleptomancy so well, he gets so much extra gold that he can afford to get tier and transition into reasonable damage items. So he's still going to be slightly behind when he gets tier, but he catches up much, much faster than he used to historically. So all of that extra gold means that his power curve smooths out significantly, and he can get to those 2 and 3 items when he really starts taking off. So he's not going to do as much sustained damage as like a Vayne or a Twitch, but he's nevertheless going to be very good. Now, I will say that Vayne is historically a very hard counter to Ezreal. Okay, so you do not want to play Ezreal into Vayne most of the time. And the reason for that is Ezreal can't pressure Vayne in lane. They both just sit there and farm off. And Vayne does more damage late game than Ezreal does, more sustained damage. And he can't kite her because she gets extra movement speed when she runs at him. And she can dodge his Qs with her tumble pretty easily. So Vayne hard counters Ezreal most of the time. So do not pick that matchup if you can. You need to have something. If you're going against the Vayne, you need to have something that can pressure her early, or something that can keep up with her in scaling, like a Twitch, for later in the game. And Ezreal's great against like a lot of tank supports also, because he's so mobile and they can't really pressure him early in lane either, and he can just kite him and deal a ton of damage later in the game. So, you know, if the enemy has a Leona, enemy has Thresh, Braum, Taric, anything like that, he's just going to get a free pass in lane, which is great. So he's not, I would argue he's not going to leverage that free pass as well as something like a Twitch or a Vayne, but it's pretty good. Like, he's better against hard engage tanks than Twitch is, because Twitch can get caught and killed, but he's not as good against passive farm tanks like Taric or Braum, because he's just not going to scale as hard as Twitch. So if it's a super free lane, then Twitch is going to be better, but if it's a hard engage tank lane without much poke, then Ezreal is going to be better. Ezreal is actually pretty good into poke too, because he gets a lot of free potions off of Kleptomancy. So he's just a nice, good, safe lane that's not going to have a lot of kill pressure in lane, but he's going to scale and has really good utility because he can kite and poke later in the game. So Ezreal's still a great choice. He has been nerfed a couple of times recently. He lost a lot of attack speed, which is very relevant as the game goes on, and he lost AD ratio on his Q, but he still is pretty good. Okay, let's move on. So just for the record, I think that in most games, if you like any of these 3 champions, I think you should play these the vast majority of the time if you really want to climb an elo as AD carry. All 3 of them are good in different situations. Like Vayne's the best duelist, probably the hardest scaling single target damage dealer. Twitch is the best, most versatile champion because of his stealth and because he's the best team fight of these 3 by far. Twitch just wipes the floor with them in a 5v5 team fight. And the stealth allows him to double as an assassin if he gets ahead, snowball even harder. And then Ezreal's the safest of the options. That does pretty respectable like poke damage, lower sustained damage than these 2, but he's much, much safer than either one of them because he has the range. He gets a lot of the extra gold. He can farm from a distance. You know, he can last hit minions with his Q if he has to, if it's a super dangerous lane or he's getting zoned out, or the jungler's just camping him. So Ezreal is just kind of like the safe jack of all trades. Twitch is the more dangerous, hardcore scaling jack of all trades, and then Vayne is the 1v1 Clown Fiesta specialist. She's the one that drives the clown car. Okay, so tier 2. So these champions can be really powerful in the right circumstances. They're not as universally good as these. If it's a blind pick, I think you just blind pick Twitch. If your first pick, you have no idea what the enemy's going to do, I think either Twitch or maybe Ezreal. If you want to play Ezreal, ban Vayne, then you can blind pick Ezreal. But I think Twitch is probably the best. Like, I have no idea what anyone's doing on either team. I'm just going to play Twitch. Okay, Misfortune is someone who is still at the top of a lot of tier lists you'll see online. I think she's fallen off a lot, though. She is still, like, okay, but the nerfs to her directly and the nerfs to everything in sorcery have made her a lot less appealing. She still is very good with someone like a Leona. Just anyone who can pressure and kill things early. So like Leona, Alistar, Taric to a lesser extent, Xayah. She really needs to get ahead and start snowballing very early in the game. So what makes Miss Fortune particularly strong? There's a couple of things. So one is her double up. Hi.
She woke up.
She had a nap.
She had a nap.
You feeling good?
You feeling happy? You feeling happy? Yeah.
But anyways, so one of the main effects that you want to do is you Q off of a minion, and then when it bounces to the enemy, it's going to apply Love Tap to them. She will deal such and such bonus physical damage. So you can Love Tap off of minions, hit them, does a lot of damage. So a good Miss Fortune needs to try to last hit minions with double tap, and it deals bonus damage. It also critically strikes if the double up kills the first target. So it's a lot of damage. It's 100% of your AD. So if you have like 80 AD early, it's going to be 80 plus 20, and it can critically strike to do 200 damage at level 1. Potentially, if you Love Tap and tag somebody with one of those. So it's a lot of poke damage early on. You combine that with her Make It Rain, which is a guaranteed slow. Now, they increase the cooldown on this quite a lot. It's a nice guaranteed slow, helps your support land skill shots, so it's going to help Leona engage. It's going to help Alistar hit hooks, or not Alistar, Thresh hit hooks, Alistar engage. It's really, really nice. You're instantly going to hit them with Comet when you put that on them most of the time, because they're going to be slowed. So she has great harassment in lane. She's really quick because of her strut, so she can get back to lane really quickly. She can rotate to middle. She can't use this in combat, though. So if she takes damage, then she loses her speed. So it's good out of combat movement speed. It does give you extra attack speed, which is nice. But in general, she's like a caster AD carry. Most of your damage comes from your Qs, and then comes from your ult late game. So your ultimate does so much damage. I mean, look at this damage. 900% of your AD if they sit in your ult at level 6. 900% of your total AD. And that's just 3 seconds. Like, it's not a long time to stand in something. So, you know, if Leona engages on somebody, she can chain CC people for about 3 seconds if she hits them with her ult, E, and then Qs them after that. They're going to be chained for probably about 3 seconds and 900%. So even if you just have 100 AD, that's still 900 damage, which is insane. If you have Infinity Edge, you know, you get an extra 105% of that. So it just completely wipes out not just one person, but an entire team. So once Miss Fortune gets, you know, a couple of items, she can just delete teams with this. And it's a pretty short cooldown. And so that makes her very relevant in certain team comps that can hold people still. So she's very good with things like Malachi, Kennen, Leona, Alistar, Rakan, just anything that can crowd control a bunch of people and hold them together. She's going to get along great with those champs. Now, on the other side of that, she's very, very unsafe. So she's the least safe of the champions that I've picked so far. And that's why she's lower on my list, is that she's very susceptible to all-in engage. So she's very good with all-in engage, with Alistar, with Leona, but she's also very susceptible to those champions because she doesn't have any kind of dash. She doesn't have any kind of invisibility or any sort of repositioning tool other than flash. So if Leona opens up on you, you're probably going to die. If she hits you with a stun, or Sejuani hits you with an ult, or, you know, Malachi flanks you and gets a W on you, you're probably going to die. And she's not that great against tanks either. She doesn't have great steroids on her abilities. She gets 100% attack speed here, but that's it. This Q really is not... this Q really is not that much damage compared to other abilities out there, unless it's bouncing off of minions to get the extra damage. So she does okay burst damage, like in lane, and this is obviously a ton of damage, but if there's a tank in her face, she's not going to be able to channel this. They're going to interrupt it. So a lot of it comes down to she's an ult bot late game who can ult from a very far distance, and yes, it can take out an entire team fight, similar to Twitch. But unlike Twitch, she's really, really bad in duels. You know, if someone comes up to her and can either knock her out of her bullet time or dodge it in some way, like a Vayne, like Ezreal can E out of it, or Vayne can like tumble to the side and like condemn to knock her out of it. Twitch he can't outrange it, but I don't know. Like if Misfortune bullet times the Twitch, she'd probably be able to kill him if he stands in it before he could kill her by autoing. It depends on who would get the crit procs. So that's a little dicier. I still think that Twitch is better for teamfight presence because he's just more versatile. You know, he can go invisible, he can pick off people one-on-one, or he can teamfight and have that 850 range ult that also just deletes people and crits them. So, you know, his ult is not as much of a, you know, complete deletion of an enemy team as bullet time is, but it's also not a channeled ability. So even if he gets crowd controlled, like mildly crowd control, he can still use his ult, and if he gets Quicksilver Sash, he can remove it. So, you know, if Misfortune starts her ult, and Sejuani tags her, or like Ashe hits her with an arrow, it's going to completely turn it off, and she's going to be pretty worthless for the rest of the fight. Whereas if Twitch starts his ult and gets hit with an Ashe arrow, he can use like Quicksilver Sash to get rid of it, and then just carry on with his ult, because it's not channeled, it's just an ability that lasts for 5 seconds. So that's one of the key differences, that bullet time can get interrupted and completely canceled, whereas Twitch doesn't get canceled by crowd control. So I think that Twitch just, like the difference between Misfortune and Twitch, I think they have similar teamfight presence. I think that if left alone and everyone's grouped up and crowd controlled, Misfortune is stronger than Twitch in teamfight. But, you know, if there's more of a skirmish or if there's a lot of crowd control running around, and the AD carry is going to be threatened more, I think that Twitch is going to be better at that. But the big difference between the two is that Misfortune has a lot more presence early. She definitely has kill pressure, and she's stronger on less items. So once she gets Ghost Blade, she's very strong. That does give her some mobility that helps her reposition to get into a good spot to use her bullet time, or to escape ganks, or so on and so forth. So because she uses lethality, her items are going to be cheaper, and she's going to hit her power spikes a little bit faster. But she's not going to do as much insane, you know, complete erasure damage late game unless people sit in her ult. So she's just a bigger bully early, less versatile, less scaling than Twitch. So if that's what you want, if you want that bully early game, like try to snowball and get ahead, she's great. Now she is a lot easier, especially in like bronze and silver, because people, you know, will just group up. They won't respect her bullet time, so they will just group up and just get into a fight and leave her alone, and then she gets to just full channel it. Whereas in like, you know, Diamond, Master, Challenger level play, people are gonna specifically look to shut her down. And the fact that she doesn't get invisibility, like I've mentioned a couple of times, is a huge hit to her over someone like Twitch, because Twitch, you don't know where he is until he opens, and so it's always tough. It's a tough decision as a support to say, okay, am I going to crowd control, use some of my crowd control on this other champion, or am I going to wait to when Twitch shows up and then use the crowd control? I mean, what if Twitch just stays invisible for 10 seconds and the fight's already over because you didn't use your crowd control and they killed your AD carry, or they killed somebody else? So Twitch just puts a lot more strain on the enemy resources to try to manage it correctly than Misfortune does, because you know where Misfortune is. You can see her rolling up. So then you can immediately go on her and shut her up. Whereas Twitch, a good Twitch player, is going to be a lot harder to do. So I think that she's really good. I just have her lower than other tier list sites, primarily because, you know, I very, very heavily value Twitch's kit. And I just think that it's a lot better than Misfortune's kit for a lot of situations, just because he's more versatile. But she is still really good. Draven is another one who's very powerful. Does a ton of damage on hit with his Q. Early game bully. Can have a hard time against tanks later. Doesn't have a ton of versatility to him. I mean, and he's very hard to play. So I have him down here. If you're a Draven one trick You can definitely gain a lot of elo. He's one of the best champions to one trick, and I talked about that in my one trick video. But they did nerf his snowball gold, so he used to be one of the best snowballers in the game. He's still pretty good. He gets a lot of extra gold off his stacks. The bonus damage off of this, 35 physical damage at level 1, and then you get 65% of your bonus AD out there, which is not your base, but that does include anything else that you have, such as runes, BF sword, all that kind of stuff. You're going to get around 40 AD, which is a BF sword. So he basically comes to lane with a free 1350 gold. Just imagine he has a BF sword in his inventory when he walks up. And obviously that's extremely strong. So does a ton of early game damage, snowballs really hard, gets great early steroid off of his W, great movement speed. Stand aside has a little bit of utility to it if you're using it properly. And this is one thing that sets aside the decent Dravens from the great Dravens is to stand aside. You need to be able to stop movement. So you need to be able to stop Jarvan from getting him with his flag and drag, stop a Zac from engaging on you, stop a Leona from engaging on you, Alistar, using that stand aside to knock people around, stop Tristana from jumping on you. There are a lot of good uses for it. But you have to learn how to master that. And then, of course, he has kind of like a long-range execute ultimate that does a ton of damage if used properly. So Draven's just really hard to use correctly. But it does pay off. He is a great early-game bully. He does scale. He does a lot of damage later. I mean, 150% of your bonus AD on pretty much every auto attack is quite a lot. So that's pretty massive. So I think in general, I would highly favor, Critical Strike on Draven, just starting off with Infinity Edge. You can go Death Stance if you want. Historically, Lifesteal is very, very good on Draven because his Q does so much damage that you lifesteal so much early on off of that. So you'll see a lot of people rushing Death Stance. A lot of people are still getting the Infinity Edge as well. I do not like the lethality build. It is nice. It does give him a little bit of a faster snowball to get Ghostblade, but it just does not scale. It does not kill tanks that well. I mean, it can be good against squishies. But I would still heavily favor... What do people on this get? I would still heavily favor Critical Strike. It's just so much better. Because crit is so good against squishies, and it's so good against tanks. So I think it's just the most versatile stat that you can get. A lot of people are going Ghostblade. I really don't like that item. Airy? No. Yeah. Nobody's getting... Okay. They're getting Bloodthirster. I like Death Stance higher than Bloodthirster because it gives you just the extra survivability, and the 10% CDR is pretty nice too. So, I mean, I would probably just go for 2 big ticket 80 items early on. I just go for like Infinity Edge, Death Stance, Rapid Fire Cannon, or you could go Infinity Edge, Rapid Fire, Death Stance. Rapid Fire is very good on him because, he does so much damage on that single attack with your Q. If you have that Rapid Fire with that long range, just boom, you could chunk somebody for like half of their health bar. So I think Rapid Fire is just extremely strong on him. I think Static's pretty good too. I mean, you can just go the standard Infinity Edge, Static, Rapid Fire if you want. I think it'd be really good. But I do think that even going 2 big ticket items like Death Stance into Infinity Edge or Infinity Edge into Death Stance is very, very good. Because he has so much scaling off of bonus AD, off his Q. And he does get some decent attack speed naturally off of his Blood Rush. So obviously, like... attack speed items are good on him, but, Draven more so than anyone else really wants that raw AD power. And so I think if you're gonna, get some, if you like to get Death Stance or like lifesteal items early on, then I think he's one of the better champions to do it with. So he's okay. He's kind of a one-trick-ish type of champion. He's very hard to use correctly, and he relies pretty heavily on the snowball. You can still be relevant late game, even if you don't completely take off early game. But he's just not as reliable as something like a Vayne, because he doesn't have a lot of mobility as a Vayne or a Twitch. You're going to see him coming. He doesn't have any invisibility. He doesn't have great ways to reposition other than just running with his Blood Rush. He doesn't have dashes. So that makes him more vulnerable to something like a Leona or an Alistar. But he can still be pretty good. He's still pretty good. Kalista's another one that I think is pretty strong right now. I think she's fallen out of favor. I'm not quite sure. I'll be interested to see if the pro scene comes around, if she's still heavily contested. But I think she's still great. She's historically thought of as a really early game champion. She might be getting starved out by... Oh, are they bringing back the X-Files? I don't know if this... I guess that's probably the older version. I used to love that show when I was a kid. Anyways. So Kalista is an on-hit... She's the highest on-hit champion that I have here. So she's the one who's going to want to get Blade the Ruined King, Hurricane, and then probably a Last Whisper type of item. Like either a Mortal Reminder or a thing that does bonus damage against tanks. Yeah, she's still pretty high win rate in the pro scene. So I think now she's pretty high skill cap too. So it's always Blade the Ruined King, Hurricane, forever and always. And then after that, it just kind of depends what you want to do. I guess you can go Last Whisper or Static Shiv, I suppose would be her third. A lot of people just kind of end on this Zeal. Jesus, 20-0. But yeah, she snowballs extremely hard. She has a lot of great utility to her. So she's one of the highest utility AD carries out there. So she has a lot of damage early. And basically how it works with Kalista is you just want to stick them with spears. All of her auto attacks stick spears in people. And then she presses Rend, her E, and it rips all of the spears out and does a lot of damage. Okay, so there's damage per additional spear. You can go through and do the math yourself. Basically what it comes down to is if she gets to sit there and stick all these spears in you, then she pretty much one-shots you at a certain point. And that's a really powerful mechanic because it makes it difficult for a lot of people to know when she's going to do that. Right? So you don't know when she's going to cast that Rend. And a lot of people, if you don't play Kalista a lot, are not going to have a good sense of when they're in danger. So that negates heal. You'll see so many times people die with heal against Kalista because they don't understand that she's about to one-shot them. So let's be sitting there fighting her. She'll keep sticking with all these spears. And then she'll just press Rend and take off like half of their health and execute them. And they'll die with their heal. Or she can also play around shields. So with something like Taric, I'm not sure how this works with Taric. I don't know if you attack them. I know it blocks the damage, but I don't know if it also applies the spears to them or not. Because it's not damage. And she gets to move every time she attacks. So she constantly can reposition. So this makes her pretty decent against tanks because she can kite them. Now she's not going to kill them as quickly as a crit user. But she can at least kite them pretty well with her Rend. Trying to read where it says... Launch a spear in the target for 4 seconds and it stacks. So I don't know with like if it's a Taric ult or a Kayle ult or something like that, if it still applies to spears. It doesn't say the spears do damage. I mean, how does Taric's ult read? I'm pretty sure you can't crowd control people while they're Taric ulted. You can while they're Kayle ulted. Invulnerability. Oh, they can still be crowd controlled. Okay. If they can be crowd controlled, I would assume they could be speared because it's not damage. It's just a debuff. I don't know. I'd have to try it in the practice tool. Someone, if you know out there, just let me know in the comments if you know the answer to that. But the basic gist of it is that she's based on this like system of spears and execution. And it makes it very difficult to gauge her true damage or like when people are in trouble. And so it makes it hard on a support too, like with Janna, because you want to shield people. But if you shield too early, then they're going to see that. And they can just wait until your shield wears off and then just rend and kill after that. And so, you know, Kalista takes a lot of skill, a lot of knowledge, a lot of practice to know when you can execute people. Because if you pull your Ren too early, you may not kill the person and they may kill you beforehand. So it takes time to stack up the Ren and then execute, but it just bypasses a lot of mechanics and makes it very difficult to learn how to play around that. So you don't know when to heal, you don't know when to shield, you don't know when she's going to do it. You don't know if you should go in and try to fight her or not. It's just very difficult to gauge what you should do against her. And she doesn't need crit. In fact, she doesn't benefit very heavily from AD at all. Because your AD on your damage is actually only 90%. She's the only champion that does less damage than the AD that you get on your auto attacks, which is kind of odd. But that was how they balanced her. She's very difficult to balance for some of the reasons I'm describing. And you do get some percentage of your bonus AD here. So AD is not completely worthless on her, obviously, but attack speed is definitely what you want so you can lodge more and more and more spears. Okay, but this can also apply to Baron or Dragon. Now, you can do the own math on here. Someone probably has the math done somewhere on Reddit. But basically, usually her Ren does more damage than Smite to Dragon or Baron when she gets to sit there and stack up, you know, for like 10 seconds. And so that means that she can outsmite all the other junglers in a fight. So you don't have to worry as much about, you know, Shyvana ulting over the wall and Smite stealing a Baron because Ren's going to be able to beat Shyvana's Smite a lot of the time. So she's really good at taking objectives. She's really good at team fights. Once she gets the Hurricane, she can stack these spears and multiple people. Each Hurricane bolt applies a spear. So she can just, you know, apply spears to an entire enemy team and then rend them all, kill them all. Eventually, if you kill somebody, it resets the rend cooldown. If you kill them with rend. And there are a lot of dirty tricks you can do with this in lane. Like, you can rend a minion a couple of times, and then when it's about to, you could stack a bunch of rends in the enemy. And then when the minion's about to die, you can use the rend. If it kills the minion, then it'll do the damage to the enemy, and it'll refund the rend. So then you can start stacking even more spears, and then rend them a second time, so it slows them for a couple of seconds whenever you rend them. So that's kind of a dirty trick where you can get a double rend off in lane if your first rend kills a minion at the same time that it applies damage to the enemy AD carry. So that's useful. And then her ultimate, they increased the cooldown on it by quite a lot. But it pulls somebody in, makes them invulnerable. So you can save people with it. You can save your AD carry or your support specifically with it. But then you can also use it as an engage tool. So your Alistar goes in, combos somebody, you can pull him back in, throw him back on top, and knock him up again. Or your Leona, you can pull her in, throw it on the enemy, and then she does all of her combos, things like that. Or Rakan, she's very good with Rakan. You throw him on top of somebody, Rakan knocks him up, then charms them. Just very, very good for stacking CC chains with engage tank type of champions. So overall, very good. Great mobility, excellent sustained damage in fights. She's gonna have very low burst damage though. So that's kind of the issue, is that like, if a fed Kalista faces off with a fed Vayne, Vayne's going to win most of the time because all those crits are just going to kill Kalista before she can get enough spears in there, or Twitch. And so you kind of need to take over the game and end the game before the enemy AD carry gets like 3 items, if it's a Twitch or a Vayne, because she's just going to get outscaled most of the time. So she's very, very good early game, and on like her first and second item, she's very good, but she starts falling off. It doesn't mean that she can't kill people later. It just means that it's going to take her a lot longer because she has to stack these spears, whereas they're just going to be critting and just like, you know, 3-shotting people. So they're going to be killing people in like 2 seconds, and it's going to take her 4 seconds to kill people. But in exchange for that, she's very good early because she scales really hard off of a single item, off of Blade the Ruined King. So she's going to be doing so much damage early on, when people can't kill each other immediately because they don't have 3 crit items. So yeah, that's pretty much Kalista. Very high skill cap, very good with a lot of the tanks in the current environment. She can use press the attack, which is good. That's what she will use. She procs it pretty quickly because she has fast attack speed. Good against Baron, good in team fights. Not quite as good in duels against someone like a Vayne. But nevertheless, pretty strong pick. If you're good with her, it's a good patch for Kalista. Another champion Xayah, pretty good right now. I think very underrated. Now, Rakan, I think, is a top 3 support right now. I've been spamming Rakan a lot, and I think he's extremely powerful. And a lot of it has to do with his itemization. I have a whole video about that. If you want to check out my channel, I just released a Rakan guide a couple of days ago. But obviously, she's really good with Rakan. So if Rakan's good, she's going to be really good because she gets a lot of extra damage on her. Naturally went to Rakan there. Let me go to Xayah. There we go. She gets a lot of bonus damage on her Deadly Plumage. So if Rakan is nearby, he gains the effects of Deadly Plumage. So, you know, she does a ton of extra damage off of this. Getting the bonus attack speed, getting the 30% movement speed, and her basic attacks deal an extra 20% damage. So Rakan gets that as well. So they're a really nice pairing, and then obviously from the Rakan side, you get to jump a very long distance to get back to Xayah. So they're a great combo. But in general, aside from Rakan, she benefits, and I haven't fully studied this, and I'm not exactly sure what this is, but a lot of people get the movement speed rune on her, and I think a lot of that has to do with it helps her reposition and kite better. Xayah is best on a team where they're trying to dive you, where a lot of people are grouping up, team fighting, and they're trying to dive into your team. That's what she wants. So she wants to put all of her feathers behind the enemy and then pull them all back to her and hit as many people as possible. So she's not as good at chasing down people and dealing damage, but if they're running towards you and you're kiting, she does a ton of damage, team fight damage. So she can completely delete people. So in that sense, she's kind of like Kalista. So Kalista chases people down because she gets that extra movement speed. She can kite as well, but she's more, and she can hit multiple people. But Xayah is the ultimate, team fight, kite, erasure type of champion. And when Xayah got released, I did the math on Bladecaller, but this is so much damage. So much damage on Bladecaller. So if you have like 5 or 6 feathers down, it just completely like deletes people. And it roots them for 1 second, which is pretty nice too. It's pretty decent crowd control. So I'm not going to do all the math here because we're running a little bit short on time. If people want to see it, just let me know in the comments. I could maybe do an updated like Xayah guide specifically. But I think that she's back in fashion. Because people are doing these team fights a little bit more, the tanks are coming back into play. Rakan is very good. They have nerfed some of the early game bullies. She's okay early game. She's not amazing. She's great once she gets to level 6. But she only has 525 range. So that makes her a little bit vulnerable early game. Now, the new rune does let her heal through, or not, I call it new, but it's because it was reworked to actually be viable. But that does get her through some tough lanes, helps her kite, helps her apply more feathers. So she's similar to like a Twitch or a Kalista, where she wants to get this certain resource on the enemy, whether it's poison or spears or feathers. And then after she applies so many of that, then she just rips it for a lot of burst damage. And her ultimate obviously is great for kiting, and great for dodging things. So it's great for getting away from Leona. It's great for getting away from like Zed ultimates. There's so many uses for this Featherstorm. So that makes her a lot safer than someone like a Kalista or like a Twitch. And at the same time, it gives her really heavy burst damage, especially against champions that don't have much mobility. So ton of damage, combo type of champion. But very, very powerful, especially against enemies that are short range and that want to run into you. So she's pretty good against tanks for that reason. And there's very, very low diminishing returns. They reworded this quite a lot. Whoa, did they change this, or are they just not saying the full description here? Oh, it's additive. Okay. So they just moved a lot of this text down to here. Okay, so I thought that it used to be multiplicative, but maybe they just weren't clear about that before. So you do 10% less damage per feather. Okay, and they do the math for you here. Damage with 10 feathers. So if you hit people with 10 feathers. So she throws out 6 on her ult, I think. 5 or 6, right? Five feathers. So getting 10 is a stretch, but it's not that hard conceivably to get to 7 or 8 feathers. But it's going to do 495 damage with 330% bonus AD. And if you have critical strike, so if you have like an infinity edge, and you crit on it, then it's 990 with 660% with 200% critical strike. Okay, so they do all the math here. So you can check it out on League with Kia. Ton of damage. One shot. One shot squishies is what this basically translates into. Basically one shot squishies and does a ton of damage to tanks. So pretty good, pretty versatile. Has a nice ultimate with good safety on the backline against hard engaged champions. Great synergy with Rakan. Pretty high sustained damage. Usually goes like Essence Reaver, Static Shiv, Infinity Edge. So lots of crit, lots of base AD. Overall, just pretty good utility champion. Decent wave clear because of clean cuts, where she throws her Q. They can hit all the all the minions in a line as they're coming up, and then she can use her clean cuts passive, auto attack a few times, then E. So she has pretty fast wave clear. So overall, good champion. Like I said before, a little bit weak in lane because she has 525, but decent combo with champions that don't have a lot of mobility because she can chain CC, she can use her Q and then auto attack for 3 feathers, then blade caller with E. So if Leona goes on somebody, then she can stun him again for that 1 second by getting 3 feathers on him. So pretty good, pretty respectful damage, but not higher up the list just because she doesn't have that raw power. She needs a few items to get going to really stack with her E. So she really needs like 2 or maybe even 3 items to do a ton of damage. Whereas, you know, some of these higher tier champions just take off at like 1 damage item. So like Vayne with Infinity Edge, Twitch with Infinity Edge, Ezreal with Trinity. But she's still pretty good. Tristana, another champion, still pretty good. Not a lot happened with Tristana. She got a couple of what I think were fairly mild nerfs. So she's still quite powerful. She just takes a little while to get going. Starts off with decent range. She's very safe as well. Oh, she was the other one at Worlds that was played all the time, I think. I think it was like Trist, Xayah, and then Varus was played some. But I think it was mostly Trist and Xayah. But yeah, Buster Shot, you can knock people back. Great safety there, W. And the W resets if you either get a kill or an assist on somebody, or if you land 4 bomb stacks on somebody, you get a reset on it. And she takes towers really quickly by applying the explosive charge to them. So she takes towers quickly, she's really safe, she does a ton of damage, has great scaling off of her Q with 110% attack speed modifier. So still really good. She might deserve to be tier 1, but she's just a little bit slower on the scaling, I think. She doesn't use press the attack. She does kind of use it sort of well, but it just feels like she doesn't have as much raw scaling as someone like a Twitch or a or a Vayne. But still a very strong, like reasonable, powerful champion. So still really good. Let me see. Are pro still using her? I'm actually not sure why she's fallen off as much as she has, to be fully honest, because I feel like she still could be really good. I just don't see her a lot, and when I do see her, I don't see her as much as I used to see her, and when I do see her, she's not as like oppressive as she used to be. So maybe the nerfs hurt her a little bit more than I thought. It did take a bit of wind out of her sails in the early game. I think they nerfed her bomb. Yeah, here we go. A little bit less bonus AD. That's all they did to her. They increase the damage here. So I'm not really sure. I guess she just doesn't have as much synergy with press the attack and some of the other runes as some of the other champions. I think she's just a bit slower to get going, honestly. And I feel like the meta is just a little faster than it used to be. I feel like games are ending maybe like somewhere between 5 to 10 minutes faster than it used to. And so she just may not be able to get up as many items. And another issue, I guess, is that there aren't as many Ardent Sensor supports. So you still have Taric running around, but there are a lot more like Leonas, Alistars, things like that. And Ardent Sensor got nerfed a lot. And so, you know, that did hurt her a little bit. But either way, I still think she's really solid. Like, she's not cream of the crop anymore. She just doesn't seem to scale as much as fast as some of the other champions up there, but still really good, nice, clean, safe champion. So she's basically kind of like an Ezreal that's like supremely safe, that has really good scaling, really good range, doesn't have as much poke as he has, but she takes towers better, and she has much higher sustained damage. So pretty good. Kog'Maw's another one who is really good, but he's vulnerable. He's very vulnerable. He has no speed ups whatsoever, no dashes, flashes, or escapes. He's just basically a walking like artillery piece, pretty much. I mean, his, you know, it's called living artillery as his ult. So if you can protect him, he can completely just evaporate the enemy team once he gets a couple of items. But he needs a lot of peel. He needs a lot of protection. This is similar to Jinx, which we'll talk about here in a second. And that'll probably be the end of the video. You know, yeah, because we need to we need to finish it off here. But, and he has kind of a weird build. He does on hit. So he'll go, and this is a problem too in solo queues. A lot of times people just will not itemize him correctly. So they'll rush Blade the Ruined King first, and then they'll go like Hurricane, and they won't get Gensus until later. You have to get Gensus early. Yeah, you got to get that Gensus early. Then you can go Blade after that if you want. But Blade is just not enough damage to rush on most champions, except Kalista is a special case. But Blade's just not enough damage. You need this Gensus. Gives the extra on hit, but the biggest thing is every basic attack will trigger your on hit effects in additional time. And so that means that Kog'Maw's W triggers twice. And this is most of his damage, is at 7% of the target's max health. So when you're just like machine gunning that out and you're doing that on hit twice, it's much more powerful. Now, I'm pretty sure the W does not apply to Hurricane. I'm pretty sure it does not apply to Hurricane. But nevertheless, it's still really, really strong. So, you know, he has some decent itemization pass, but you have to go Gensus, and then I think Blade the Ruined King, and then you have options. Hurricane needs to be in there too. You can go like a Wit's End after that if you want to. But generally, he needs to have Gensus plus Blade. So you can take off with just Gensus, but it's just so much of it is dependent on your team. You have to have really good peel. Like, you have no other way to get around that. So I think if you just want to go for a super, like, pretty long range, like, burst champion, I would just rather play Twitch than Kog'Maw any day of the week. He's just a lot safer. The invisibility helps you out so much. Helps you escape ganks. Helps you position yourself in fights so much better. So, you know, in a meta that's dominated in large part by things like Leona, Alistar, Rakan, I would not want to be playing Kog'Maw. But he is very good, and especially against tanks, that is a lot of max health shred. So if you can peel him, if you can keep the enemy from getting on top of him, he can definitely take over. So he's a pretty good pick into things like Taric, into things like Janna. Things that just can't really get on him and pressure him. That's just going to be a farm off lane. He's a pretty good pick into that. But it's just really, really dangerous to play him. He also does a lot of magic damage, so that's another consideration, is if your team has a lot of AD, so you've got like a Yasuo top and a Zed middle or something, he's a pretty good hybrid build, because he does a ton of magic. So he does do some AD, but he also does quite a bit of magic. So if you need some magic damage threat, that would actually be a position where you might want to consider him. Varus is another one that can be pretty strong in the right circumstances. The problem with Varus right now is that people are just building him really poorly. Like, so many people are building that stupid Tier plus Ghostblade build that Firewall advocated because some Korean was playing it. Like, that build is okay if the rest of your team has a lot of damage and if you hit all of your skill shots. It's good if you need poke on your team. You should still virtually always play Ezreal if you want poke on your team. Like, there's no reason to play that build on Varus if you can play Ezreal, because Ezreal does the same thing way, way better than he does. So, you know, if I would pick Varus, it'd be because you want his ultimate, you want that utility, you want that stun. And at the same time, you know, you just want to have some decent sustained damage. So I think you need to be going Gensu's Rageblade, Blade the Ruin King, on Varus. And so he's immobile. He doesn't have a lot of escapes like everyone else, but he does have his ult. He does have Grievous Wounds built into his kit on his W. Or his E, rather. But he's mostly utility, so he does pretty good damage. It's just that ultimate, it's basically like Ashe, but with more damage, I feel like, is Varus. And so he has decent utility, a couple of different builds, but overall, I feel like there are just better choices out there, especially if with that Q-Poke Ezreal build, just play, or the Q-Poke Varus build, just play Ezreal, guys and gals. Just do not do that build. Like, the problem is tier... The same thing that I explained with Ezreal earlier, tier is just awful as an early buy. It's wasted 750 gold, and you're just going to get stomped in lane. The reason that Ezreal gets away with it is because he can do Kleptomancy, which is, you know, gives him enough gold to catch up really quickly, even though he falls behind with tier early. Varus is not going to go Kleptomancy, so he's just going to be behind early on. So he's giving up a ton of damage. Then on top of that, he's going to go a lethality build, which doesn't scale that well. Lethality is designed to be built early game for, you know, pressing advantages. So with Jhin, with Misfortune, is designed to take over the game in the laning phase and then really snowball and, you know, close out before the enemy gets all their good crit items, right? So if you're going a lethality champion like Misfortune, you need to close the game. You know, when you have Ghostblade, Dustblade, you need to end it before that Twitch gets Infinity Edge, Hurricane, you know, Static Shiv, or you're going to die. Because lethality just does not scale that well, especially against tanks. It's an early game stat. And so why would you get tier, which is extremely weak early game, and then go for this early game build based on lethality that requires you to snowball and take over? It just does not work most of the time. And some pro circuits, it can work because they hit every single arrow and they know that the rest of their team is going to have a lot of damage, right? So they're going to have like a mid laner that does a ton of damage. They're going to have a jungler they can count on that does a ton of damage. And so they're picking Varus just to have a little bit of poke and to have the utility of his ultimate. If they decide to pick him and go for that build. That's just not a good game plan for solo queue, especially at Platinum and lower. If you're AD carry, you need to do a lot of damage. So you need to build AD carry to do damage most of the time. And that build just doesn't do it. So if you want to play Varus, I think he can be good, but it needs to be Gensu's plus Blade the Ruin King. Okay, finally, and these are kind of the honorable mentions. You can win with these, but they're just a little bit weaker. I wouldn't recommend them most of the time. Jinx is probably the most prominent one here. The issue with Jinx is the same issue with Kog'Maw that I just talked about. And a lot of people are playing Jinx because she has her little happy elf skin, which is a cool skin. And I do like the little train whistle noise that it makes. But unfortunately, Jinx is just not in a great spot right now because she has very, very low mobility. Her only mobility is if she gets a kill or an assist, then she can run really fast. So she's a very snowbally champion. She gets a ton of extra attack speed, ton of extra movement speed if she gets that kill or assist. It's not even really that much. It's only 15% attack speed, whereas someone like Varus gets like a lot, like 80% attack speed or something if he gets a kill. She does get a lot of movement speed, which is great for repositioning, or for running people down. I mean, she's a good pentakill champion because she can run everyone down and kill them when she gets all this extra speed. She does get some nice range, you know, off of fish bones. Now, you need to be going Infinity Edge Hurricane on her because Hurricane applies your fish bones or whatever, your rockets, your Pow Pow rockets. Oh no, Fish Bones is the rockets and Pow Pow is the minigun. Okay, so Fish Bones applies or Hurricane applies Fishbone's hits. Now they changed this at some point. Champions are not down on Flame Chompers, huh? It's an interesting designation. Okay, so knockdown doesn't trigger. Okay, I'm not sure what the significance of that is. I guess if you're rooted, you can still attack. If you're knocked down, you can't attack. So that's like a stun, basically. Okay, here, this is a big one. It's 7:15. I talked about this before. Ruins Hurricane Bolts now properly deal Fishbone's bonus attack damage to their primary targets. So Fishbones wasn't doing enough damage before with Hurricane Bolts, but now it does. So that's a lot of extra damage, and the cooldown on this was reduced by quite a lot on Zap. So she does a lot of damage. There's no problem. You know, that's obvious to everybody that's ever played with or against a Jinx. She does a lot of damage, especially once she gets Infinity Edge, Hurricane with Fishbones in team fights. You know, area of effect, critting rockets that can hit multiple targets with Hurricane is obviously very powerful. Because if you have 3 people stacked together, when you hit the primary target, it's going to do the crit and the full damage. When you hit the secondary targets, and it splashes. So each one of those rockets is going to hit the other 3 people if they're all grouped together really tightly. So that means that you're hitting like 9 times. Because each one hits 3 times. The one on the left, you hit them with a rocket, it's going to splash, hit the other 2. Hit the one in the middle with a rocket, it's going to splash, hits the other 2. Hit the one on the right, it's going to splash, hits the other 2. So you're hitting them 9 times with Hurricane and these rockets if they're grouped. Each one of those chances are 3. It can crit a lot and deal a lot of damage. Just trust me, it's going to evaporate people with these fights, okay? 9 hits per auto attack, all of which can crit, is disgusting. And it applies on-hit effects and all that good stuff. So that's a lot of damage. So that's kind of the bread and butter, is just rockets in team fights. The minigun does take towers pretty quickly. Flame Chompers, kind of, like, it's a decent zoning tool. It's okay. And then the Super Mega Death Rocket does a ton of damage, obviously, if you hit people with it. It has a pretty nice hitbox, too. So that's pretty good. So she has the ability to, you know, snipe people out long distance. It's a lot of fun. You deal a ton of sustained damage with Jinx. With the switcheroo. Just the issue is, just like Kog'Maw, she has no escapes. So when Leona gets in your face, or Alistar, or Kha'Zix, or Talon, or whatever, you're just going to die. Most of the time. Now, I have Cog a little bit higher than her because Cog does that magic damage, which is something that in some team comps actually could make Kog'Maw a pretty high priority pick. If you want to run like an AD mid and AD top, having that Kog'Maw for magic damage, at least some magic damage in the bot lane, has a lot of utility to it, whereas Jinx doesn't have that option. So, if I were going to play, you know, relatively immobile, super high, like sustained damage champion in order, I would play Twitch, or Cog, or Jinx most of the time. I think those 3 serve a similar role. I think that Twitch is more versatile. He's got the invisibility. Kog'Maw has the magic damage. Similar range. They all have a lot of high range. They all have a lot of splash damage. They all use Hurricane. And then Jinx is kind of third tier. Jinx could put out potentially more damage than these 3. Maybe not Twitch. But I think, I don't know. It's hard to say. I think they all just put out a ton of damage. Jinx has the least amount of versatility. But she is fun. She is cool. So, you know, she does have a nice skin. I just think that she can win. She just gets out-competed. I just think that if you want that type of thing, that Twitch or Kog'Maw are just going to be better for it. But she can still win. Jhin is someone, I really don't favor Jhin right now in solo queue. I know a lot of people like him. Sorcery Tree just got nerfed a lot. He was a lot better before these nerfs to Sorcery Tree. But he's very high skill cap. You really have to hit your Ws. You have to hit your ults. And the payoff, there's so little for it. He does very little scaling damage. It's okay. Yeah, he can one-shot people with, like, he's very good against squishies. He's awful against tanks. He has to go lethality. All of the lethality items got nerfed. So all of the sorcery items that he likes got nerfed. Lethality got nerfed. Some of the supports he was good with, like Leona, got nerfed, although Leona's still pretty good. So, he's okay. I just think that he's been nerfed too many times. He does have really nice wave clear with his Dancing Grenade. He does a lot of damage early, has a ton of kill threat. If you start snowballing with him, he, you know, can completely crush people. But I just feel like if you don't snowball, if you're not getting out of control, you know, early on, then you're just really going to fall off late game. You just can't do anything about Maokai or, like, you know, 3 or 4 item Shyvana or anything else. And he's relatively immobile. So not only does he not do a ton of damage late game to tanks, especially, he can't get away from the Leona in your face or the Maokai or, you know, anything like that. So it's okay. I think if you want to play the early game bully, who has limited scaling against tanks later, I would just play Miss Fortune. She just has more consistent poke. It's going to do more damage, and she has a lot more utility in late game team fights. He's not that great at one-on-one, and he's not that great at team fights. Like, Jinx is going to slaughter him late game unless he's really far ahead, and he just happens to have his 4th shot up and crits her or something. Like, maybe he beats her there if he has Infinity Edge. But in general, I think he's just going to get out-dueled, and I think he's going to get outplayed in team fights. Captive Audience and W just don't have enough punching power in team fights. You know, Dancing Grenade's okay. The ultimate you really can't use in fights. It's really for sniping people down at the end. So he's alright. I just think that if you want that style of champion, if you want the early game bully, just go with Miss Fortune. Her ultimate is much, much more impactful in team fights than his is. And she has similar bully power early. She has a bit more utility or mobility, at least, so she can run around the map faster, although she can't use it in combat as much. I just think that she's a better version of Jhin. Now, Jhin is a lot of fun to play. I like his theme. I think he has a very creative and fun kit. I just think that he's not in a good place right now. I think he's been nerfed too much. But he's alright. Ashe, you know, if you hit every single Ashe arrow, you can win, but she just doesn't have very good item scaling. She doesn't have a great mastery right now. She kind of has to press the attack. You know, one of Ashe's biggest assets is her ability to scout the enemy jungle, and that information is just not as useful in solo queue. People don't leverage it as much. So, you know, I just wouldn't play Ashe. Nice utility. If you want to play someone who has an impactful ultimate that's going to scale a little bit better, just go ahead and play Varus. Lucian is someone else that I thought was going to be a lot better in the preseason, and you can definitely win with Lucian, but one of his major problems is he's just so short range. 500 range, just pretty rough. Like, he does have mobility. He can dodge engage champions. He does work very well with press the attack. But he's just really short range. His itemization paths are just really not that great. Like, he can go crit. It looks like, you know, some people are still going for this, you know, Blather and King into Black Cleaver build, which is just awful. Like, they've nerfed this so long ago. I guess it's just Apollo, really, that's going for that build. I guess Untara is, too. I don't know. I just feel like Lucian's been nerfed too much. His items just aren't that great anymore. Like, he doesn't synergize as well with crit as some of these other champions. He has okay matchups against Vayne, and okay matchup against Vayne early on. But I think Vayne overtakes him at like 2 or 3 items. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know precisely why he's fallen off so hard. I'm not a Lucian expert, but and it seems like he should be really good with press the attack. But I think a lot of it is just his range. Creates a lot of problems. And his itemization is just not it's not ideal right now. Caitlyn is someone who's fallen really hard. She used to be the best AD carry, and now she's arguably the worst. If she's not the worst, she's really, really far down. And a lot of that is because she just doesn't have a good keystone. And, you know, a lot of these other champions got a lot of things that help them scale much better into the late game, and she just doesn't have those tools. So she's a really early game bully that has to get very, very far ahead, and if she doesn't, then she's going to lose. And she's really hard to play correctly because she's basically a combo mage. You have to get your traps on people, net, land all those headshots. And I think she's just been nerfed too hard. I don't remember exactly how many times or how much she got nerfed. I know she got nerfed a lot, though. And she just doesn't use press the attack very well. If they nerf press the attack a lot, then she might make a comeback. But right now, she's just way too conditional. You have to snowball really hard early. If you want to do that, just play Misfortune. If you want to play the snowball or die, just play Misfortune or Jhin or something like that, or Kalista. There's just a lot better options than Caitlyn. Sivir is just bad. Like, she has really short attack range. Her movement speed is nice. It's pretty good with tanks, in theory. And she does scale pretty well in team fights, but she gets murdered in any kind of duel. I guess she has 500 attack range, unless she had even lower than that. She doesn't have a great keystone. She does wave clear really, really well. So if you just want to run around and just wave clear the map and just get to like 300 CS, she's good for that. But in general, she just does not have enough power. I don't think. She does have a good win rate, but it's a very low play rate. You know, press, Sven's playing press the attack. Most people are doing the movement speed one. I mean, maybe she's making a comeback. Like, she usually goes Essence Reaver, Static, Infinity. So, I don't know. She's okay. Whenever I see her, people just don't play her right. She's a very late game champion. I think that's it, is that she requires like 3 items to really start going. And she excels in like really late game team fights, and games are just closing out before that happens. So that's rough. Corki pretty bad. Doesn't have a good keystone. He's been nerfed a lot. He's pretty good on single item with Trinity Force. Honey. Close my, oh god. Close my door real quickly. So he's okay in the mid lane because he scales really well with levels. So he gets that solo experience in mid lane. And like one-on-one, he can bully people out early on. But like bot lane, he levels a lot slower. And he's just not as good in a 2v2 scenario as other options down there. He just doesn't scale. I'm not an expert on like why he's good in mid lane versus like not good bot lane, but I think a lot of it is that he just doesn't have as high a scaling as you want a bot laner to have, because he doesn't use crit as well as others. But in mid lane, because he's ranged, he can bully people out, and he benefits so heavily from levels early on. I think that makes him a lot more effective, because he can be a better bully in the mid lane than he can in the bot lane. So I'm not entirely sure why he's so awful bot lane, but like okay mid lane. I think it has a lot to do with his levels and his ability to bully better in the mid lane, though. And Quinn is the final one. I'll just mention, just don't play Quinn. Some people play her. You know, she has a decent win rate on champion.gg. She's like the 10th or something, 7th win rate. But I don't know. I mean, maybe there's something out there I don't know about Quinn. Obviously, the blind is good in duels. But I just don't think she has enough scaling to be a good AD carry. She got nerfed a while ago, so she doesn't do as much burst damage. I'm not even sure what her picture... There it is. 525. I'm just not seeing it. I mean, maybe like if it's with a Leona, like someone that you can really burst and kill early, because she's going to go lethality. So she has to like take over the game early. Just if you want to be a bully lethality user, just play Misfortune. That's just all there is to it. Anyways, that's going to be it. So thank you very much for watching. Guides always a lot longer than I intend for them to be, but I don't do the AD carry guides that often, so I just really wanted to go in depth about my thoughts about these champions and why I think they're strong right now. So anyways, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Have a good day, and I'll see you next time.